Thank you. Yeah, so welcome everyone. We're delighted to welcome you to the launch of Craft School Material World in partnership with the Eden Project. Today we'll be introducing you to the project in full. I'm Joanne Hayward, the Crafts Council Education Manager, and I'll be covering a few basics of the project and an introduction on our 3 new briefs. Nikki Dewar, Director of Learning and Skills, will be giving us an insight into sustainability in craft. Zoe Dennington, Head of Learning and Participation, will be presenting our Make First approach to craft education. We'll then have a 15-minute break before we are treated to a make-along session with jeweller and Crafts Council trustee Melanie Eddy, with a chance at the end to share your making with each other. This make-along will begin to explore some of the themes of the project. Following that, we'll have another 15-minute break, and then we will be hearing from Bran Howell at the Eden Project. He is their education specialist, and he'll be talking about sustainability through his unique lens before we wrap up the morning with some acknowledgements and some special people to thank. There will be a chance to ask questions at the end of each presentation, either in person by raising your hand or by using the chat, however you prefer. And our team will keep an eye on the chat throughout the morning. So now for our first presentation, which is mine, I'm going to share my screen. There we go. Can everybody see that? Yeah, wonderful. So Craft School Material World. Craft School Material World is a new craft challenge for primary and secondary learners aged 5 to 16. The climate emergency is at the top of the agenda for children and young people. So Crafts Council has worked with partners, the Eden Project, to challenge learners to explore the impact of climate change on everyday life through craft and making. We've worked with the Eden Project on creating briefs for learners focused on 3 themes. Drumroll: renewable materials, creative mending, and reclaiming and reusing. Starting in September 2023, children and young people will work in their schools to make 3D work in response to these themes. Craft School Material World is underpinned by our Make First, Crafts Council's education pedagogy. Make First puts materials in the hands of children and young people at the earliest opportunity, empowering them to make decisions and the direction of their work and develop their voices as craftspeople. We hope the challenge will inspire a lifelong love of making and give an insight into creative progression routes and careers in craft. Craft School draws on our first 2 years of partnering with Yinka Ilori, as well as our learning from our previous National Schools project, Make Your Future and Firing Up. This has all helped us to shape our Make First approach to craft education. With creative subjects increasingly squeezed in our schools, Craft School creates a vital opportunity for children and young people to learn through messy play, joyous processes of making, and we have placed anti-racist and anti-ableist approaches at the heart of Craft School. Building a programme that we hope is accessible to all education settings and celebrates the progression of individual learners and the unique perspective they can bring to craft. So how does it all work? Craft School invites learners to create their own 3D work in response to one of the briefs in between 6 and 10 hours of hands-on making. So we've reduced that this year, slightly less time for those that want to do it in kind of short, more intense bursts. But obviously, if you want to do more than 10 hours, you can. It's totally up to you. And it's all about getting materials into the hands of learners. Learners take the lead in an open-ended making, exploring processes and making their own decisions about their own work. By thinking through making and taking creative risks, they are building practical skills and developing as makers. Support for teachers is at the heart of Craft School. The programme offers a toolkit of resources to help teachers deliver this challenge with their learners. As well as this, we have 3 online teaching training sessions and a monthly online catch-up with the Crafts Council team and our network of craft educators. Teachers will also be celebrated through a teacher award at the end of the programme, and we host a big celebration event at the end of the year online. So this is the timeline. You get to register from now onwards, so there'll be a link today to join us. A toolkit and further resources will be shared from September onwards. You do your 6 to 10 hours of craft making or more if you wish, and this can take place at times across the year that best suit you and your teams. So 3 online CPD sessions are delivered in October, November and January, and our monthly online drop-in sessions run from October to March. Submissions are made in April, so we've extended it this year listening to your feedback. And we're going to have flexibility across a few weeks for you to register, just to allow for the variable busier points for different kinds of settings and year groups, whether you're college, schools, you've got exam mocks on. So we're trying to make that even more accessible this year. An independent selection panel will judge the work in May, with our diverse range of experts, each bringing something different to the judging, ensuring we celebrate the journey travelled, risk-taking, individual stories and experimentation, rather than just focusing on, final pieces in the making in isolation. Yeah, and the celebration event will be in June 2024. So these are our 3 themes. Renewable materials, using natural materials found in your area, exploring the themes of habitats and nature. Number 2 is creative mending, exploring different ways to mend and combinations of these materials to give them new life. And the 3rd one is reclaiming and reusing, using materials that would otherwise be thrown away, exploring the themes of sustainability, climate justice and global making practices. We'd love for your learners to come up with their own briefs in response to these themes to capture what does the theme mean to them and how would they like to explore it through their making? How does it relate to their own heritage, their community or the place that they live? So we're going to give you some prompts to work with, but we'd love for you to explore them in your own way, make them unique to you. Okay, so this is a whistle-stop tour of some of the makers that we're going to be sharing in the toolkit. So there are a lot more than this, and these are just some of them, but to give you a few examples for our first brief, renewable materials, making using natural materials found in your area. So the first example on the left here is by Alan Brown. It's a nettle dress that he made. It was a 7-year project. So he foraged the nettles, sourced them, dried them, spun them, weaved them, and then constructed a garment. So the whole process took 7 years in total. And it's a beautiful piece of work, and there's a film that's made of it. So that's available online if you get a chance to see it. The next piece is some brooches by Jane Sedgwick, and she has her own forest. She is a custodian of her own woods, so she kind of like looks after that stewardship. So she uses her own renewable materials to make these beautiful brooches. She's a jeweler. She makes all kinds of jewelry objects. I added this one here because the brooch backs are really, really beautiful. So there'll be more details of that in the toolkit. And then Nick Cave's sound suit here. So that's 2011, I think that piece, but it's made with twigs and found objects. But the approach here is the twig was used, he found it at the time of the Rodney King riots. So this work is all about the twig he found that was discarded on the floor. And it's all about that kind of discourse about being a black man in America at the time and feeling like being discarded. So 3 really different approaches, just to get you starting to think about those themes. Creative mending, some more examples here. So top left, we have J Blades. So furniture, kind of looking at upholstery, reusing those objects, mending objects, adding different materials. And top right, we have an example of crochet being used to mend, but to create an artwork. So this maker, you might look at ceramics or a broken glass and then uses crochet as part of that. So combining 2 materials together to make one new harmonious object. And then bottom left, we have an example of Japanese textile techniques. So I think often in the West, we think of this as a mending technique and very much, perhaps we explore it too much as a trend. So this project will think about the symbolism of it. And it's not just a mending technique, it's about making something beautiful so that you don't need to mend it, it lasts a long time. So 3 examples there. and reclaim and reuse, making using materials that would otherwise be thrown away. So we're thinking about themes of sustainability, climate justice and global making practices. So the example on the left here, they are bricks made out of plastic, so like bio waste. I think, yeah, they have the capacity to make 2,000 bricks in a day, this like small company that is led by a materials scientist. So yeah, you can see the scope of these bricks being laid here. So it's all made from plastic waste. And then the piece on the right here is part of the Crafts Council collection. So that is made from waste plastic carrier bags and reclaimed yarn. And that piece is actually woven, but then it's press formed, it's heated to create a completely new object. So a lot of alchemy in those two pieces. Okay, so how can you get involved? You can register your interest to join us, and we'll send out a follow-up email today. The challenge is live from September 2023, and we'll be sharing further information and resources to support your delivery. You can join our Craft Educators Facebook group if you haven't already, and we will be refreshing our website in the coming weeks with the, we have the Yinka Ilori Craft School on there at the moment, but we're refreshing with a whole new array of resources for you to get involved in. And my email address is at the end there as well. If you want to get in touch, if you have any questions after today, then please do get in touch. So very quickly, why is it worth doing? So much needed hands-on learning with materials and tools. Make First builds learners' confidence, resilience and creative risk-taking. It's inclusive and flexible to meet the needs of all your learners and celebrate their achievements. Craft practice supports good mental health for learners and teachers, very important to support our teachers. And it incorporates new perspectives on cross-curricular subjects. Teacher CPD, access to high quality resources and links to growing craft educator community of practice. It includes information about craft careers, you know, how do you get into this area of work? And also, and this is a highlight for me as well personally, to learn from the Eden Project's approach to sustainability and move to a more sustainable creative curriculum. And it will raise the profile of craft art and design with your senior leadership team and the wider school community. Thanks very much. So, okay, we have 1 minute left if there are any questions, and I will stop sharing my screen there and see. Do we have any questions in the chat?
I didn't see any in the chat. It might be that people have more questions as we carry on talking. Jo, Nikki has just arrived, but she had a bit of a train delay, so I was just suggesting to her that we swap over.
Oh, good idea. Great
so
idea.
that I go next.
Okay.
Are there any questions for Jo? If you have more questions about the logistics of the challenge, about how it works for learners, any of that stuff, do just pop them in the chat and we can come back to them as we move through, can't we, Jo?
Yeah, just having a look through, seeing where everyone's joining from. Oh, that's great. Oh, welcome everybody. Yeah, so Zoe, we are bang on time. Over to you.
I know, I was very impressed at your timekeeping, Jo. It's very impressive. I can't promise the same, but I'll do my best. It's just lovely to see everybody here today. We're really excited to be kicking off this version of Craft School, and I think just so excited to be talking about this theme of sustainability and craft and working with the Eden Project. I think everybody that I've spoken to has just said, oh yes, we'd love to, like, our learners are so interested in climate justice and this is such a key issue for us. It feels like a really important moment to be kind of talking about this. So yeah, we're really keen to get started with everybody. I am just going to talk briefly about Make First, which is our what we call a craft education pedagogy or kind of approach to teaching, and this really underpins Craft School. So all of the kind of creative briefs are written with this in mind, but also the kind of judging criteria and what we're really looking for learners to produce, and the journey for learners to go on through Craft School is underpinned by Make First. So we thought it was just a nice opportunity to kind of introduce everybody to that and have a bit of a chat about it. I do have a presentation, so let me just share that with everybody. Sorry, I should have introduced myself as well. I'm Zoe Dennington, so I'm the Head of Learning and Participation at the Crafts Council. So I work across our schools programme and also I work with young people and communities as well. So here we go, let's put you on full screen. Can everyone see that? Lovely, okay. So what is Make First? So this is an approach that we've been working on, as Jo kind of mentioned, over the past 10 years of our work with craft education, working with teachers, working with learners, and really lots of thinking that we've done about what it is that's so special about making and about working in a hands-on way with materials for young people. So it draws on lots of early years practice and really emphasises kind of playfulness, open-ended exploration, and putting learners in control of their work. So none of this is new, and I'm sure as kind of creative practitioners and arts practitioners, lots of you will be very familiar with this approach. What we find in our discussion with teachers is that probably beyond early years, this kind of open-ended approach is quite difficult for schools to deliver because of the kind of assessment emphasis on assessment in our school system, because of lots of other pressures. So what we think is really important is talking about Make First and as craft school for a kind of space, as a space for carving out that opportunity for young people to work in this kind of open-ended way with their making. So the other thing to say about Make First is that what we've tried really hard to do is to make this as inclusive an approach as possible. So we're aware that there are lots of things about arts education that sometimes mean it's not accessible to some of our young people. So we've really tried to think about kind of anti-racist and anti-ableist approaches to craft and making and really embed that in the approach. So I hope that that comes through, and that's something that we'll talk more about kind of throughout the programme. So we really aim to make Craft School as inclusive a programme as possible and to create opportunities for celebrating everybody's achievements and for celebrating what everybody brings to craft, because all our young people come with kind of different perspectives on craft and making from their own backgrounds and their own experience. So what are the kind of key elements to Make First? And it's really simple. And we've got these really nice, I love these illustrations. We had these done a couple of years ago. I think they really sum Make First up. So Make First is all about kind of diving straight into making. It's about getting material in the hands of children and young people at the earliest opportunity and allowing for learners to kind of make their initial ideas and develop them through making rather than sketching them. So we found that it was quite common practice, especially for DT teachers, that you would go through a process that was much more design-led, that was about kind of sketching and drawing, perhaps iterating your ideas, and then finally getting to some making right at the end and making a kind of final product. And we really wanted to encourage teachers to use making as that process for developing an idea. So yeah, kind of playfulness and open-endedness is really important. So Make First is really all about the process of making and not so much about the final outcome. So what we kind of talk to teachers about here is that this process of problem solving is really important for learners, and it can be quite difficult to stop ourselves jumping in sometimes and interrupting that process. So we really encourage teachers to give learners that space to try things themselves, to just have a go, and to stop ourselves kind of jumping in with the answers and with suggestions as young people go through that making process. So Make First is really about young people developing their voice as a maker and their kind of identity as a maker. So it's a very learner-driven approach, which aims to empower children and young people to draw on their own cultural identity and their existing knowledge and skills and experience as they work with materials, and to develop their kind of own identity as a creative person and as a maker. So it's all about tweaking and tinkering, using materials to play, develop and test. and adjusting your approach depending on how the materials respond. So we're just increasingly aware that young people have fewer and fewer opportunities to be hands-on with materials or with anything in their kind of in an increasingly screen-based world. So Make First is really about developing material knowledge as well, and doing that process of thinking through making. So trying something out, finding that it doesn't work, trying another route, and adjusting your approach there. So Make First is very much not a straight line. So we know that making is not a linear process, and we know this from all of Crafts Council's work with makers, that people have very different approaches to their work that often involves working on several things at once, just starting again because something's not working out how you wanted it to, kind of picking something up, putting it down, coming back to it 2 years later. So it's that process of making being quite messy. And kind of encouraging young people to think beyond starting something, working on it, finishing. Because often if you've got kind of work happening with different materials, that might inform what you're doing. So we encourage people to think of it as a kind of more natural approach. And I think this slide is really important. So a lot of the teachers we work with talk about how increasingly children and young people are kind of scared of getting things wrong. And I think, again, this is connected to a culture of assessment within schools, that there often is a right answer and a wrong answer, and that young people are kind of increasingly anxious about trying something new. So we see craft as a really important space for developing resilience for young people. That it's a really safe space to fail, and that failure is a really important part of a making process. So kind of trying something, finding it doesn't work out, and feeling all right about that, and actually trying it again and kind of failing better next time is really crucial for Make First. And this is one of the key outcomes for us for the project, is that young people start to develop that confidence and resilience. So Make First is a very collaborative approach. So young people throughout craft school, they're able to work independently or as a group, but we really encourage a kind of art school based approach of being very collaborative within classes and creating opportunities for young people to work together. So encouraging young people to work alongside their teachers. So rather than teachers passing on skills, the teachers that we work with through craft school find that they are actually learning alongside their children and young people, and learning together. So that approach of being making community is really important for us. And I think this is probably our most important slide, really. Oh, have I missed one? I've missed one, haven't I? So yeah, building skills and knowledge from interactions with materials in the physical world. I think this will be particularly important and interesting as we think about sustainability this year, thinking about renewable materials, giving young people a kind of heightened awareness of where materials are coming from and those issues around the distance materials have travelled and whether materials are renewable and what happens to materials after they are made into craft products. Like, there's so much interesting stuff that we can dive into here. And I think from taking that very physical, tactile approach to working with materials, we really bring a new dimension to a lot of those conversations. So I think this is something we're interested in exploring a lot more this year. And yeah, finally, that Make First is all about kind of joyfulness and the pleasure that comes with making, that feeling of accomplishment when you've produced something that you're really proud of, but also that feeling of complete absorption in what you're doing while you're making. So we talk a lot about crafts value in terms of mental health and well-being, and that process of having your hands busy and your mind completely calm and occupied is really important for us. So I think there's lots to celebrate there. So those are the kind of main Make First elements. Just a couple of practical things, because I think sometimes it feels a bit abstract and people are not quite sure exactly what we mean by like, what does this actually look like in a classroom setting? So sometimes teachers think we're like very, very purist about this, and there have to be no boundaries and it has to be completely open-ended and a complete free-for-all, and that we're suggesting that this shouldn't be scaffolded with kind of learning resources, which is absolutely not the case. There's lots of ways that you can embed this kind of learner-led approach within different contexts, and also support different learners with different abilities and different learning styles to work in this way. So throughout the project, we'll be talking about different ways of kind of supporting a Make First approach. But you might, for example, set a challenge like we have, or you could use kind of other resources, technical drawings, other more specific challenges, problems to solve as a way of supporting Make First for your students. And our kind of teacher toolkit will include lots of different ways of doing that. We talk a lot about how to set your classroom up for Make First, and creating an environment that straight away feels slightly different to perhaps an ordinary lesson. So thinking about the way that students are seated in the classroom, the way the materials are spaced throughout the classroom, that naturally encourages this kind of open-ended way of working, collaboration, and supports learners to make their own choices about what they're making. And of course, the thing that we always highlight, and the thing that's really, I think this year's challenge really brings this across, is that Make First can be used to support a huge range of different subject areas across the curriculum. So clearly, through our partnership with Eden Project, we're talking a lot about science and sustainability in that sense. There's huge amount of connection there, but Make First can also be used to support maths outcomes, to be able to support kind of literacy outcomes. It's very, very flexible. So I think that's an important thing to highlight. So that's a little bit about Make First. Have I forgotten anything, Jo? I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Zoe. Thank you for that really in-depth presentation. That was wonderful.
I'm going to drop a link into the chat, which is like a version of those slides that I shared. So we have a little an infographic that talks about Make First. That will also be embedded within the teacher toolkit. So you will get a copy of that too. And I think what we've been having some really interesting conversations with Bran over at the Eden Project about the kind of synergy between this Make First approach and the Eden Project's approach to sustainability. So it's been really interesting for us to hear about how the Eden Project think of sustainability as a kind of way of life, as very much a process, as something that you have a go at, and your first attempt might not be perfect, but the kind of having a go is important. So I think there's lots of very interesting overlap between Make First and thinking about sustainability as a process, which we're really excited to kind of explore this year. So thank you. If there are any questions, pop them in the chat and we can come back to them. And yeah, I'll share that link for everybody.
Yeah, someone asked if we can share the presentation. So we will share all the presentations from today, and we can also share the recordings of the Make Along. So if anyone can't stay for the whole session, you'll get all of those resources. Thank you, Zoe. That was great.
No worries.
And I think, yeah, we are bang on time again. Excellent. So next we move on to our Director of Learning and Skills, Nikki Jewett, who will be talking about sustainability in craft. Nikki,
thanks, Jo. Thanks. Thanks, Zoe. I think that's a really good framework, I suppose, to keep in mind the context, I suppose, in which we've considered and set this year's challenge in. It's obviously goes without saying, really, that sustainability and environmental responsibility are pressing issues for all of us. And they're becoming more and more a key topic of conversation in our world of craft and making. The Crafts Council's 2020 Market for Craft report clearly identifies that ethical making and sustainability is important to makers as well as consumers. Social trends are driving ethical consumerism. There's a heightened consciousness and commitment to environmental sustainability, and it's really directly reflected in consumers' attitudes towards buying craft. So across the current and potential market for craft, almost half are looking for ethical or sustainably produced objects, and more than half of the market indicate they prefer to buy objects that they know are locally made. So with this in mind, we often also see that craft has been seen as a harmless escape from stresses of contemporary life. We talk a lot about health and well-being. It's a wholesome antidote to mass production in a globalized world. But when viewed through the lens of sustainability, however, it's not immune from criticism. Criticisms with their often toxic metal glazes, use of non-renewable virgin materials, and carbon-heavy kiln firings are ripe for a radical rethink. Problems are many and varied. The mining of China clay alone leaves behind tons of waste for every 1 ton of clay extracted. And shipping clay around the world comes at a heavy carbon cost. Once glazed and fired to over 1,100 degrees, clay cannot easily be reused, nor will it be biodegradable. Craft makers are increasingly trying to work in a way that reduces their environmental impact and mitigates climate change. Sustainable craft is a global movement, and it's important to highlight the impact and influence of craft thinking from global majority countries and makers in driving forward an environmental agenda within craft and making. Approaches to sustainability in craft range from low-tech, things like mending and reusing materials, to cutting-edge biodesign and material invention. But much of this thinking is underpinned by a circular economy model described by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation like this. In our current climate and our current economy, we take materials from Earth, make products from them, and eventually throw them away as waste. The process is linear. In a circular economy, by contrast, we stop waste being produced in the first place. Circular economy, therefore, is based on 3 principles driven by design: eliminate waste and pollution, circulate products and materials at the highest value, and regenerate nature. So most straightforward then, sustainable craft is about consumer fewer, better made items and learning to mend and repair things we already have. Examples can include Japanese craft mending techniques like sashiko, a decorative method of stitching used to repair cloth, and kitsungu, a method of repairing ceramics using lacquer coloured with gold and precious metals. A maker called Celia Penn is really well known for her creative mending practice, and Jay Blades is very well known for his furniture restoration business. Other makers focus on reusing and repurposing existing materials. Clay Apanova, I pronounce that right, uses black plastic and foil survival blankets to make 2D and 3D works of art. Lekat Ruskell uses found materials to make large-scale collages and moving sculptures. And jeweler Tanvi Kant uses waste textiles to create jewelry pieces using binding, wrapping, and knotting and stitching techniques. Makers are often thinking about what happens to their products in the long term. Studio Tipo's Long Pai cookware collection is based on pottery traditions from Manipur in northeastern India, using black earthenware that is burnished to avoid the use of non-stick chemical coatings or glazes, meaning that the places will eventually biodegrade. Locally sourced and renewable materials are another approach. Weaver Kazuto Takadoi creates sculptures using materials from his allotment and garden, and Sam Buchanan sources timber for his furniture from UK managed woodlands as part of the Tree Maker initiative, his practice inspired by Chinese and Japanese approaches to making with wood. Some people are taking this to the next level by creating new materials from wood and plant waste. Pinatex, a brand launched by Spanish leather goods expert Carmen Haizoa, uses the same fibers to make a leather-like material. Ferdinand Lapos has worked with farmers in southwest Mexico to create Toto Moxtal, a robust wood-like decorative veneer made out of the husks of colourful Mexican heirloom corn, which is used as a material for interiors. At the most technologically advanced end of the spectrum, biodesigners are incorporating natural processes like building or making, often by fermentating, cultivating, or genetically engineering organisms such as bacteria, algae, yeast, fungi, and proteins to grow materials and objects. Think furniture made from fungi, yarns made from processed kelp, and genetically engineered spider silk. Advances in genome editing allow us to manipulate DNA with precision, and biodesign has become a multi-billion-dollar industry. Jen Keane has developed a trainer using a bacteria which forms a mesh-like structure on a nanoscale. Her weaving process involves creating a scaffold of threads, something she likens to the warp in 3D, overlacing it almost like a spider's web. And one of the projects developed by Natso Audrey Chitsy's studio Faber Futures is a biodesign dyeing technique called Project Collicolor, A soil-dwelling organism is grown directly onto fabric, and its naturally secreted pigment creates a watercolour-like purple hue that is chemical-free, colour-fast, and uses dramatically less water than industrial dyeing. And there's lots and lots of other examples. So we know that for schools and teachers thinking about craft skills and making skills, thinking about environmental sustainability and the ways in which we can bring that into the classroom and into the world of conversation and experience for our children and young people is really difficult. You know, there's a lot of technical language, there's a lot of assumed expertise needed for this. And there's also, it's a very emotional piece of work. You know, the environment, challenges and the crisis we're facing carries an emotional weight. There's a lot of guilt about this. I think the way in which we've approached Craft School in this particular Material World Challenge is about being supportive and about encouraging everybody that taking that first step is the most important process. Craft School has been particularly designed to be supportive of whatever stage you're at, whatever level of experience you have in these areas, so that everybody can take part and feel like they're part of making a difference and engaging in this conversation and bringing these experiences into your learning space. So what I'm suggesting is that everybody takes advantage of all of our support, all of the amazing resources that the team has produced, the online CPD that's going to be coming over the autumn. Take advantage of the opportunities to connect to each other, to connect to our experts and really learn from them. Share what you've learned with each other so that others can learn and really build on that. This work is messy. It is about improvisation. It is about getting it wrong. It is about innovation. It's about disrupting. And I'm really excited to see what all of our schools come up with as they take on this new Craft School Material World Challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. That was great. It was so nice to hear about so many makers. I think that'd be a really good starting point for the teachers here today. Just keeping an eye on the chat. Do we have any questions about Nikki's presentation or Zoe's presentation or the project as a whole? Okay. We have a few minutes before the break. What I did want to mention was, it just popped into my head as Nikki was talking, there is an Eden Project podcast that is run by some of the learners at Eden Project. So it's Travis Smith and Emma Hickey. They're really wonderful, accessible podcasts. They talk a lot about the courses that they're studying on, but it's also about the exciting world of horticulture. And I've been listening to them all recently while I've been out running, and it made me think there's so many connections between our world of craft and their world of plants. So I think for teachers over the summer break, yeah, they're not heavy at all. They're really lovely, light touch, very funny, but it doesn't dumb down the content as well. So yeah, please do have a listen. You can find them on Spotify or wherever you find your podcast, they'll be there. So yeah, it's Tim Smith's on there as well. He does some really lovely recordings about education, the sustainable world, plants and mental health. It's all there. So please do dip in. So we are going to have a break at 1:15. Yeah, until 10:30. So it is an opportunity to collect some materials for Melanie's session. So you should have had that materials list when we sent out the invite or in your Eventbrite registration. But in case you didn't, I'm just going to run through that list so you have an opportunity to run around. It's really accessible materials. Please don't worry if you don't have everything on the list. It's whatever you have to hand. So the essentials, if you have them, will be bottle tops, milk, squash, water, pop can lids, either or both. Don't rush out to the shops and buy plastics or metals that you wouldn't ordinarily need. It's just literally what you have to hand. Paper clips or safety pins, either or both. Ribbon, string, wool, a mix of whatever you have in stock already. Glue, scissors, push pins, tack pins, markers, nail varnish if you have it to hand, paints, a mix again of whatever you have. Optional extras are elastic bands, buttons, broken toy components, so like wheels, you know, odd bits of Lego. They could be fabric toys, metal, plastic toys, fabric scraps of any kind, paper or collage scraps, needle, thread. So you don't have to have everything on that list, just a combination, perhaps the materials you enjoy working with as well. So that will be for Melanie's session at,
Joe, can I just add
yes,
something? I was just going to say also, like, just anything that you think might be helpful, like, even if you're not sure, like, if you have it around, just bring it. You can always ask me if you think I have a suggestion. It's very exploratory, so whatever you bring will be something interesting we could possibly work with.
thank you, Mel. Thanks. I'm just having a look at the chat. So someone said it'd be great to have a list of the amazing makers Nikki has mentioned. Yes, we can share that, and that will all be in the teachers' resources as well. A lot of those makers. Yep, another one. Oh yeah, and Zoe responded to that in the chat. Thank you. Right, just scrolling down. So do we have any other questions? And you can put your hand up and ask in person if you want. Ask Nikki or Zoe, myself or Mel. No, just scrolling down. I'm just seeing who's here today. We've got a lot of jewelers here today, and I think it's probably because Melanie Eddy is here. I think we maybe have a few Melanie Eddy fans waiting to do your workshop. Scanning down. Oh, that's great. Okay, so
probably ready for a break.
Yeah, I'm just going to say that. Yeah, so please, yeah, go and enjoy your break, collect your materials, and we will start back promptly at 10:30. Thank you, everyone.
Hi, Joe. Just a quick question. Are we going to start directly or are you going to introduce? I just wanted to check.
And we'll start directly. So
Okay,
you said
cool.
you're going to talk a little bit about yourself. So I think
Yeah, so I'll give a couple minutes for people to come back and then I'll start checking.
Still got 1 minute. I can see. Yeah, I'm having a scan through. We have a
Yeah.
lot of jewelers here today. That's so nice. See, yeah, still waiting on a few people.
No, it's fine. I just thought I'd turn on the sound.
I'm looking at everyone's cups of tea as well, scanning on the break.
Yeah.
So I've got my shout out to James and Tilla Waters, Mid
very
Wales
good.
studio. Oh, you can't see, it's blurred, isn't it?
I don't have a cup of tea,
Porcelain.
but I do have a glass which is recycled from a sparkling water bottle that my partner Andy's like, he loves doing that with. Oh, you do too?
Green glass day. Zoe, have you got your green
Yeah.
glass?
No, I'm in the office, so I've got a boring office glass. Which unfortunately is not recycled, I don't think.
Scanning down. See if any other cups of tea.
They're great. I love them actually. We use them all the time.
Okay, it is past, but I'm just scanning along. I think there's still a few people, but Mel, we are going to get
doing some
started.
talking. So if I do the introduction, then if people come in, then they'll still be here by the time we start with the making.
That
So,
sounds great. Over to you, Mel.
Over to me. So I think Joe did a little mini introduction about me at the start, but if you've joined later, just gonna recap. So my name is Melanie Eddy and I'm a jewelry designer and maker. I'm also a Crafts Council trustee and I'm also involved as a director with the ACJ, Association for Contemporary Jewelry, and quite a few other like organizations relating to contemporary jewelry and craft. So I have a practice which is based in working with precious metals predominantly and sculptural jewelry. And normally that's out of my workshop, which is in Clerkenwell at the Goldsmith Center. And I've been there for over a decade. And today I'm kind of zooming in from my house in Hertfordshire, East Hertfordshire. I've got a good setup here for how to visually show you what I'm doing. So that's why we're doing it from here today. And that's also, it's a little bit quieter. It's a bit noisy in the workshop sometimes. And I'm also an educator. So I've also been involved in jewelry and design education from doing kind of arts comm and like community-based learning around making with different kinds of materials to making in spaces like, for example, anorexia wards at hospitals, conflict zones, Afghanistan being one of them, and also at Central St. Martin's postgraduate level. So I kind of operate like on a kind of broad spectrum. And I'm going to be talking a little bit today, about jewelry, kind of some elements about jewelry in terms of like circular economy. And it's really great because a lot of the things I was going to introduce today's session too were covered by Joe, Nikki, and Zoe. So that's excellent. So they'll be familiar kind of concepts and terminology to you. And then I'm going to introduce some kind of techniques and some things to how to work with different kinds of materials. Hopefully it will spark some ideas and it will get you interested in making. The idea is for you to explore like with these materials and objects and like a bit of 3D exploration. It's not like a bake-off challenge thing where we have to do something in a certain amount of time. It's just to get you started making and exploring, and everybody has different experiences with materials and with making. So, you know, you can bring whatever you have to it. If you have something you like doing, we can talk about maybe how you can incorporate it into making jewelry, which essentially predominantly is things that you wear on the body. But it's a big spectrum of what you can do with jewelry. And so I'll kind of talk a little bit about that. One of the things that's interesting, I think, with jewelry and also to do with sustainability, I mean, there's a lot of things about the jewelry industry that are problematic, that are being explored. There was just a really big conference at Harvard last month looking at sustainability in terms of the jewelry industry. But there are some good things. There are some exciting things, and some of the things that are great are developments around material use and the people that extract materials and how we support them and how they're paid fairly. But some of the other things that are interesting about jewelry is that historically it has been practicing a circular economy for a very, very long time. And part of that is because the nature of a lot of the materials that are used in certain kinds of jewelry have been reused for other things. So shells and things like that were used in jewelry initially were also used as currency. So they were seen as valuable. Precious metals and gemstones and different kinds of stones that are used in some types of jewelry don't degrade, and they are like kind of automatically recyclable. I mean, they can be thrown away, but they don't tend to be. So they tend to be reused in different ways. And one of the things that's interesting about some of the materials that are used in jewelry is that they can be recycled endlessly with very little loss to them. So that makes it kind of an interesting prospect. But what's also interesting about contemporary jewelry is how many different kinds of materials and ways of making and ways of processes that are used in terms of how we make jewelry. And our perceptions of jewelry are growing and changing. And that's really exciting. You saw some really great pieces earlier, Jane Sedgwick's example. And I'm sure the kit will have other interesting things for you to explore. So I'm going to talk about kind of 4 of the main ways that like the jewelry industry operates like a circular economy. And I'm going to try and show you a couple of examples. I was like manically trying to find some things that I thought I had that I was like, but I can talk you through. And then I'll introduce some materials and some approaches for you to get experimenting with. And hopefully you'll do a little bit of making today. If you don't want to do making, you just want to practice some techniques, that's absolutely fine. Or if you want to kind of observe. So the first way in which, and these are also things that I do. So I'm known for like a sculptural kind of signature style, faceted kind of geometric pieces. People often come to me for commissions or for having things made. And an option that is also something I do is incorporating like kind of heritage or heirloom pieces. So we look at like ways pieces can be reused. I also am very interested in looking at stones that have been overlooked that might have like chips or cracks or issues with them and seeing how they can be incorporated. I work with stone cutters that can like kind of refresh things, or sometimes they're just used as they are. And so there's different ways that things can be used. Sometimes, for example, I might actually physically use the piece and break it up in different ways and use elements of it into like another piece. And other times we might like transition or use different bits. So I'm going to switch over to a different view so that I can start showing you some objects as examples, and then I'll be ready for when we're making. So I'm going to share my screen. Let me know when you can see it. I have a little circle wheel of thinking happening at the minute.
It's coming up. It says Melanie Eddy has started screen sharing. Yes, it's up.
Can you see it? Okay, great. And if I'm looking around, it's because I've got a couple different screens that I'm using. So if I'm looking to one way, it's because I'm looking at a different screen to like keep track of you know, all the different things you're seeing. So one of the first ways that it works as a circular economy is that, well, one of the ways, not necessarily the first, because we don't want to say a hierarchy of the different ways, but is that people will put things back into the system. So people might have broken jewelry or jewelry that they don't want anymore, and that will go back into the system and that will be refined, and they will get given money to the value of that. They can do different things with that. Those resources, once they have them, sometimes they're used to put towards making a new piece, maybe incorporating elements of the other piece. The other way is to like kind of repurpose, recycle bits of things in a different way. The third way might be to like repair or completely like kind of take apart and use elements of it. And then there's other aspects which are to do with, for example, like we have costume jewelry, which may not be able to recycle in the same way. So we can pull apart components and use elements of that. So there's all kinds of different ways that we can think about operating a circular economy. with different things. So I'm going to show a couple of examples. So, and one of the things that was interesting, Nikki mentioned earlier about ceramics, and once they're fired, they don't necessarily, they're not recyclable in the same way. And it's really interesting because I have these necklaces which incorporate some very old beads, and the turquoise beads are actually, I'm going to pronounce them probably faience. I think it said faience. It's a type of like very old ceramic that was used in Egypt and North Africa, and they've survived like for a very long time. And so, you know, these beads kind of have been circled around. They were given to me, and the chains that the pieces are strung on are actually things that were turned in, and because they weren't broken as change, the value was used towards a new piece, and the chains were repurposed like as it is. So as opposed to them being melted down, they were broken, they could be reused as they were. So that's one example. This is an example of something that used to be a ring, and the top of the mount was reused and made into a pendant. So this is looking at like kind of things you can do in terms of recycling and using with precious metal. Broken components can from something else can be turned into other pieces. So these components from something else were made into separate pieces. They can be shared amongst different people. And so that's just kind of a few examples. And what I want to talk about now is some of the things that we looked at in terms of like different kinds of materials. So I'm going to introduce some of the things. So we have some different kinds of tops, bottle tops, pop lid tops, like paper clips. I always have a jar, or I have lots of jars of different types of buttons that are from different things. So they could always be interesting, and I'm going to show you how you can use them as a decorative feature, but also like as a clasp or a closure. It's about string and ribbon and things. I also do like kind of embroidery in my spare time, and I kind of keep the offcuts, and I'm going to talk about how maybe you can use that to embellish like scraps of fabric. If you enjoy sewing and you know how to sew, or you're interested in learning how to sew, you can also incorporate fabric into like jewelry pieces. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And the other thing I wanted to mention here as well is, so one of the things I think is really interesting about what Zoe was talking about in terms of introducing people into making and into craft practices is that I have a profession now, making, and so making is part of my career, but that's not how I started in my introduction to making. So I was very lucky to be introduced to different kinds of making in different ways when I was young, through like family friends and through different programs, at school, and that community-based programming. And so really kind of developed like an interest and love of kind of making. And one of my favorite necklaces was actually given to me when I was a teenager, and it was made of lots of these little top lids strung together, with thread, and it had been painted with nail varnish, and I thought it was the best thing ever. So there's lots of really interesting kind of approaches to that. And one of the things I wanted to show as well is that is how you can also incorporate, like my grandmother. I spent a lot of time with my grandmother and some older individuals when I was younger, and she had a friend who had a lot of knowledge of the plant world and different uses for plants in terms of medicinal uses, but also in terms of materiality. And she taught me how I could use dried berries and seeds and things like in jewelry and in adornment. So I wanted to just show this example. This isn't something that she made, but this is something I have, where seeds are kind of strung with string and made into like a necklace. So there's different ways you can use things that you find in the natural world as well. During lockdown, there were some challenges that were set by the ACJ, the Association of Contemporary Jewelry, and I made these earrings out of kind of lid milk and bottle top lids and paper clips, and using some flowers that were just on the grass outside of where I was living. So yeah, I just wanted to show kind of a fun little project. So this, I have pliers, so I was able to make a little kind of rudimentary hook with this, and this was like a receptacle, so basically you could change the flowers. So obviously the flower would only last for the day, but you could put a different type of flower in another time, and it was just a fun way to do something different, because for me, I was away from my workshop for the first time because my workshop's not in my home. So it felt strange not to be making jewelry. So I made jewelry with what I had access to at the time. So I'm going to show some examples of a couple of things that we can do. So this is a similar type of thing, but this is just made with a button and like 2 different lids, and with a paper clip. I've done it in a different way, so you don't have to do like it's done. So this is not, you don't need pliers to do this. You can just use your hands, and it's just done very simply with a little hook here, and then you have, you know, I'll hold it up. You have a little earring. You can do the same thing with a button as well, and this is just bent with your fingers. You don't need any kind of pliers. Obviously, if you do have those kinds of things and you want to get a bit more experimental, then you can, like, you know, go to town. And there's also a couple of other examples here, and then I'll show you some of the techniques. This is a wrap bracelet. This is just made with some ribbon. So kind of this ribbon here, that's basically from a project. I have lots of things. I mean, that's from like a crochet project from years ago. I still have them, all the bits. And so I'm just using a couple of different types of buttons from my button tin. And I've just used like a double strand of, I'll talk you through this, and just knotted it. And then basically what that allows me to do is wrap it around, and where the double ribbon is knotted, it's like a natural opening for me to secure it essentially first on my wrist like this, and then continue to wrap it around. And so that it's different lengths for different people, and you can wrap around and secure it somewhere else. So it's, you know, there's lots of kind of, and that this one has a couple of different buttons. This one here is just a single button done in the same way. Wrap it around, use the end opening. I'm very vocal with little noises as well, which can be entertaining for people who share a studio with me. Just gonna see if I can get this. There we go. So, and you can do the same thing with found objects as well, like anything with a hole in it, like this is a little shell with a hole in it, can be made into like a little charm or a little pendant. So this is just like a string, and we're just using a button here to make a closure at the top. Similar to what I talked about, was just a smaller scale. So that's just making your closure for the piece. And what I've done here to add a little detail to it, as opposed to it just being a plain like string, I've just knotted it regularly, and I've just used a ruler to maybe do the first one, or just pick a spot and then just measure it as I'm kind of going. So it has these knots all the way along, and it kind of makes it seem a bit like, you know, more like intentional in terms of the design. So yeah, there's just a couple of examples. Another one I wanted to show that's kind of interesting is if you are into sewing, or interested in sewing, or you know, or you could draw a little letter, or do a little design and kind of stitch something. Like these are just done with remnants from previous projects, and I've just used some pins to secure this. This is just an old t-shirt that I actually use to dry my hair, because I like using t-shirts for drying my hair, but I just used a bit of it that I didn't need from the sleeves. And I've just used 2 bits of fabric, and what I've done is I've put like a bottle top inside to create a bit of form, and the back bit, which is like the kind of the top of it, is like reversed. And so I've also just drawn a little area, and then I can stitch around here, and I can use often you might have like safety pins. If you don't have them, usually if you have a sewing kit will have a little safety pin it, but often we have them around. And basically you can stitch you know, the back of the safety pin onto the base of this when you've done, and then you've got like a makeshift brooch. So there's just a couple of fun things you can do. I'm not showing specific projects, I'm just showing like ways you can work with things. Another example here is like paper clips. We often have lots of paper clips sitting around if we're educators. Sometimes they're all in different colors, which can be really fun. So I've just linked them together. I mean, you can make a just chain with them, and then you can add beads, or you can add things into them, or you can even put fabric or stitching around them to add a bit of color. This one I'm using as an example of something fun we can try. So this is just a necklace that I made with different kinds. I used to do lots of projects in places where you couldn't use metal working kind of equipment. So they had to have things that you could operate like cold connections and things like that. So random beads and different types of threads and strings that had been used from different projects that made this like kind of bib necklace. So if you look at here, it's kind of like that. So I thought actually what we could do, or what you could do, is you could use two bottle lids, and you could use some paper clips to start your necklace. So you could have that. You've got your two bits here. It naturally has an opening here that you can use to open and close the necklace once you've finished it. What you can do is use a ribbon, a button on a bit of ribbon. I'll show you how you can do this. You can thread it through one of the pop can top lids. That becomes like a natural stopper on the end of the chain, and then you can, you can put your ribbon through, do the same on the other side. You could add other ribbons onto it and make like kind of a feature with ribbons and buttons and whatever you have. So there's just a couple of ideas for how to work with the materials. With the plastic, if you want to put holes in order to thread your paper clip through, you can use a push pin, or you could use dressmaker's pins, or like, safety pins or things like that. I mean, I often have at the studio, I have push pins. So you could just make a hole with a push pin. And then once you've got your hole, you can, I'll open up paper clip to show you. Once you've got your hole, you can thread your paper clip through, and then you can thread it onto there. You could thread a button on. You can thread a couple different ones. And so that's kind of a way you can make holes as well, that you can then use with thread. So you could, as opposed to a button, you could thread these on and make like a little pendant, or make a detail for a bracelet. So lots of different ideas for you to try. So I hope that's a good start.
Thank you, Mel. That was great. And just wanted to mention that the image on my screen is like staggered a bit, like there's a lag on it. So I wonder if before we go to the next bit, if we could just try reconnecting with you.
Okay, sorry about that.
I could still see everything clearly. It's just slightly staggered.
Okay. Okay, what I could do is also just change it to the direct feed, so I won't be in the little box, but it will be clear.
I think that's fine because we can see you in the corner. Yeah, let's try that. Thank you, Mel. So many ideas there.
Yeah, so it was a bit of a toss-up between like doing a project or showing you lots of ideas, and then I thought it might be nice to show you lots of ideas that you could then work with depending on the materials. I'll have my screen on, and then you can hold up things if you have questions about how to work with something. So yeah,
so we're back now to the
you
screen.
see me, if you pin like my screen, you should be able to just see my hands.
Oh, now I'm spotlighted. Nobody wants that. Yep, back to Mel.
Is that working?
Yeah, do you want to move your hands and then we can see if it's still the. Yeah, it's maybe a tiny bit blurry.
Okay, let's see if I can do a focus. Does that help?
Yeah, that's a bit crisper. How it might just be my end as well. So like Zoe, how is it on your screen?
It's slightly out of focus maybe, but I think it looks fine, and yeah, it's much smoother than before.
Okay, sorry.
I think we can see everything. It's looking good.
Thanks. Thank you, Mel.
Probably
Also,
my rural internet connection.
oh, we've got our first question in the chat for you, Mel. Could you go through how to thread a tin can top with a ribbon again, please? Yeah, could we have like a kind of like step-by-step demo? That would be lovely.
Is she talking about like this one or just generally?
I think it's how to thread a tin can top with ribbon. So yeah, that one you've got in your hand.
So there's a couple different ways. So I'll show you some examples with these two here. So I'll cut another piece of ribbon.
So Melanie Mortimer, just to ask, did you mean like stringing a few together as well? Yeah, Melanie Mortimer.
Yeah. So there's two ways. If you want to put a bunch of them together, there's a lots of different, because there's two holes in the, you can either go, you can go through like this, you can go through both holes on one, and then you could add like the next one. So this is one example. And you can build up different types of ribbons as well. So this is one example if you want to make like a row of different ones. The other, but that's one way to do them like this way, but you can also like stack them up if you want them to overlap.
And presumably you could use any kind of, you could use like wool and bundle colors together.
Ribbon, but like the one I had was just string. With the string, sometimes it's good to double up, so you don't just have like you don't just have one piece of string, you might have a couple pieces of string going through there. So if you want to double them up, you can stack them over the top and then just make sure you go through both holes with both. So then you start to overlap them like this. So then you can make a thicker one, and you can just keep building. You can just keep building like upon that by kind of going back in.
Mel, did you say you were gifted one when you were younger? Someone had made you
one?
Yeah,
I really wish I could have at my family home in Bermuda. But you can kind of stack them, you can overlap them, you can do different things. Like the one I had initially was just like next to each other like this, but then you can like think about different ways you want them to function. Just experiment with them really. And but the other way I was talking about, which is the way I did this way, is to combine them with other materials. So for example, if you have like this one's on the end of on the ends of some paper clips, so you don't have to just use one, like so. And this one basically you've got a stopper on the end, so this is the button, but you could also do it with a bottle top if you put a hole in it so that you could put like a piece of thread through or something. And then you basically put your like bit that doesn't have something attached to it yet through, kind of pull it through. Oh, that's an open one. Pull the one that's actually got the button attached to it. Here we go. Yeah. So pull it through. And then the button becomes like the stopper. And then you can like thread, you could then go ahead and thread like, you could go ahead and thread like other ones on. For the buttons, there's a tip I was going to say as well, really good. So then you could do a mixture. You could like have the button and then you could have other ones on there. I was going to say as well, like for if you want to put the ribbons through buttons, your paper clips are really good pushers. Like if you're struggling to kind of pull it through the other end, you can just use like the end of the paper clip to push like the ribbon like kind of through the hole, and then you can pull it out with your finger out the other end. I'll show you with string and the ribbons as well. Pull out button.
Could you use like a chunky sewing needle as well?
Yes, I was going to say like a big embroidery needle or a big thick kind of needle is really good. One thing that's really helpful too with string is just to twist the end. If it's like open and you're having a hard time getting it through, just do a little twist before you push it through. And usually that will help to allow you to push it through, like, you know, a smaller hole. Oh, this one's really open. Bigger than my other piece of thread. So if I do a double bit of thread, I'll show you. How you can kind of you can use it like that as a stopper, and then you could then double thread like another top maybe. If you want to color these, you can color them with markers, or depending on what's suitable, like and you know who you're working with, like nail varnish as well is interesting for adding color, different kinds of acrylic paint. So you can do a mixture of different kinds of objects. These are also fun as well to like put onto the paper clips. So in theory, you can add things like kind of continue to add, like you could do a little long dangling earring by adding single earring, a double earring by adding like things on to like a paper clip. Or if you have old findings, for example, if you have like earrings with findings that you don't have anything on the end and they're broken, you can also reuse those as well.
And Mel, today we're thinking about jewelry, but could you go much larger with this technique? You know,
Yeah,
thinking about
definitely.
weaving
I
and
mean,
like.
Yeah, you could make like placemats. You could make like, you know, all kinds of things, especially with like lots of bottle tops. You could make kind of like pop, you know, like things that you could rest things on. Oh, what's really fun with this is actually you can make belts with them, which are quite fun. Like you can add buttons and then you can make a belt. And if you have these, like, you know, these double things separating, then it's kind of like adjustable to different sizes, so that, you know, if you put buttons in different places, then people can put them through the opening in different spaces. Yeah, I think there's like lots of different possibilities. And I think one of the things that's also interesting, like, I mean, you probably often come across these kinds of like beaded bracelets with, you know, stretchy elastic. You can use, you can kind of tie together elastic bands as well and thread things on them, and they can be like kind of a makeshift version of like a stretchy bracelet that you kind of, you know, can put on with bits. You can thread elastic bands through buttons or through these lids as well to do stuff like that. Does anyone have any questions? Or you're just getting stuck in with your material?
I can see a few making hands and a few people just really intently listening.
Okay, well, cool. As long as people are happy. But the idea is basically like just to have fun with 3D exploration. And actually one of the things I wanted to say that was really important about what Zoe and Nikki said earlier is that when, you know, I went into design education without, like, I came from a different route. So I hadn't done foundation. I'd done art at school, but I hadn't done foundation. I hadn't done an undergrad in an art or design background, but I had work experience. I had been working in the industry. And so the way I made was different. I didn't have this, I wasn't taught formally about lots of sketching and technical drawing and all that stuff, which is interesting because like later on I, you know, did that and I taught that, but I didn't come to it with that. So I made a lot from 3D exploration. I made a lot from, and that's because that's the way I had been introduced to making. So, and what I was really, it took me a while to feel confident and feel like my making, like, you know, because I didn't have like lots of sketchbooks or lots of like drawings, or didn't understand or know about this like idea about iterative drawing. I approached it from a different way. And then I gained my own confidence about my own way of working, which meant that later on when I was teaching, when students worked in different ways, I was really able to support them because I had myself had gone through that experience, and I had felt like, oh, I'm not familiar or not comfortable with lots of sketching and drawing, and this is a way I make in a different way. So I think different people learn different ways, different people engage with materials and come up with ideas differently. And you can come up with ideas from making and 3D exploration just as valid, as like drawing out an idea or drawing out. And I think as well, 3D play and exploration is really important and exciting. So yeah.
Yeah, in fact, we've got we've got a few jewelers here today. Sarah Drew, like you work with upcycled materials like beach plastics. It'd be really interesting to hear from your point of view. Do you design through making? Do you like think through your models and experiments? Putting you on the spot there, Sarah.
Oh, it's fine. Sorry, I had my tumbler going. I couldn't hear you very well. But no, I completely agree. I didn't come from a traditional route either, so I learned a lot from. I had the materials as a starting point, really. So depending on what I find, that kind of starts to design off. And I think because I'm using found materials, it helps take the pressure off. And I think that's what you're talking about, really, isn't it? We're not using pressure materials, so that whole trial and error and allowing yourself to fail is that's a creative process, isn't it? And I think kids respond really well to that.
I agree. And I also think like as well, like even if if you're working in different ways, I think one of the things that helped me to be like kind of more exploratory or courageous in my making coming because I had learned jewelry in a very traditional context, in a very traditional fine jewelry context, because I had that exploratory and kind of like fun in making outside of it, it meant that I was like open to try things in a different way, and I wasn't like afraid, because I had these materials. It made me like just like think like, okay, well, I know that if I make a mistake, I can like melt it down and I can start again, or I know that I can reuse it in a different way. And it's so like I think that's a really important part of the process as well.
Yeah, definitely. I've done workshops with teenagers, and I think they really get that. And I think it's nice to sort of take the pressure off them, and they're really good at doing random, aren't they? And I think that it's that whole kind of idea of, if you had a drawing and you were being really precise, I think that can be quite inhibiting, really. And I think what you're talking about and the sort of projects you're talking about are just really creative and allow people to express themselves better.
Yeah. And sometimes you can work through ideas like in the 3D that like if you're trying to draw, it's difficult for you like to conceive of. Whereas if you're handling material and you're doing kind of composition like with actual objects, then you can actually think differently. And like you were saying, you're being like the thing about found objects and what you were talking about, that building up that skill of being really diagnostic and like kind of seeing what you have and seeing what could work with it, or seeing what other elements you have. I think that's a really important transferable skill that you can, that can go into other elements of your life as well, right? Not just
exactly.
in terms of making
problem solving and the whole connections thing. You have to do things in order, don't you? Because you can't heat them up and stick them together like that. So I think that whole problem solving thing makes you be quite relaxed and meditative and logical. Yeah.
Like I often think through other things while I'm making, like not necessarily like just what I'm making, but I think through other things that are going on in my life while I'm in the process of making.
Especially textile techniques. So I use crocheting as well, and I think that's really lovely because that is something you can take anywhere, and it's something that kids can carry on at home really easily, isn't it? So that the materials cost really low, like the things you've been using. And I think it's really nice if people feel like they can develop the skills out of the classroom as well, isn't it? And they can go home and carry on sewing or crocheting.
I'm going to switch back to this for now, but I can always switch back to if someone asks me a question, I need to show something, just because I think it's nice for the discussion that, we can talk face to face. But and I think that's the thing, like about accessibility and about being able to work and being able to like kind of get excited about making with like different kinds of materials and different kinds of objects. Like one of the things I didn't mention, which I wanted to have an example of, which is if you're someone who is familiar with stitches, or if you're open to learning stitches, like there's lots of content for learning how to do different kinds of stitches around, like you can access. I have a really great ring, which I was trying to find, which is just made from carrier bags, like kind of like folded carrier bags and like stitched, like, kind of made into a circle and then stitched to it, stays into a circle. And those are materials, often we have mending kits that you can use the, needle and thread from. And, a lot of us, well, even though we're moving away from plastic carrier bags, a lot of us might still have them, or even if it's like scraps of fabric, you can do the same thing with them. I mean, if you people think about jewelry not being able to have certain kinds of material for jewelry, but like we wear clothes and we wash them, so you can do the same thing with like fabric or textile objects. As long as you make them in a way that's kind of robust, then they can kind of be kind of washed and reused as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's that giving things a second life, isn't it, as well, especially with fabric and things like that, that you're not chucking it into landfill. And yeah, I think people get that. And I think it sort of makes people feel less impotent if you can have them making things out, because sometimes when you recycle stuff, you don't quite know where it's going and if it's getting recycled. But if you're doing the recycling immediately, then it's a bit more motivating, isn't it?
And I think it's also a nice option as well. Like, if you want to, if you have the time or you're able to create some time for making, you can make for yourself, but you can also make for other people. And so you can make gifts and you can share those things. And often that opens up conversations about the making, and someone else might then say, oh, I love that you made this for me. How did you do it? Could you teach me how to do that? And then it's like, it's another shared activity, right? And I think for me, I grew up spending time with people who made things in different ways, like whether it was fishing weights or whether it was like, crocheted, knitted objects for someone's child or someone's friend's child. And there was a lot of conversation and community that happened around those activities. And I think like, there's ways that we can kind of benefit from that as well.
Oh, definitely. It's magic, isn't it? I think, when I've done workshops and people sitting around, and because people aren't face to face, they talk about the problems, don't they? So I think, when you're making something, people will discuss things that they might find a bit intimidating to talk about face to face with somebody, because you're looking at the sewing or the thing that you're making. It's very good from a mental health point of view, because I think people feel like they can discuss things that might be bothering them, really. And it does build up communities like that, doesn't it?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I can see lots of busy hands. I'm looking at the video. Kit is stitching away. Something.
Away.
And Kamiko as well. Oh, in fact, it's really interesting. Kamiko's here today. Congratulations again to Kamiko. She won our Teachers Award for Craft School Yonkers Challenge.
Oh,
so congratulations. But Kamiko is also a jeweler. We found out recently, and works. One of the techniques Kamiko uses is like the beeswax, stretching the beeswax, but because you work in wax as well. Mel, any insights in sustainability around wax and that kind of practice and casting, just that might be interesting?
Yeah, so I mean, with wax, there is some wastage depending on the type of process that you're doing, but there are ways that you can collect the wax and then you can melt it and then you can reuse it. So I often use lots of my offcuts don't get thrown away when I'm wax carving. They get put into a big pot, and I'm not at the studio today, so I can't show you, but they're just put into like 2 big pots, and then they're reused for other objects which might be smaller, or when I'm joining things together, I heat up the wax and I use those offcuts to do that. So I think, and I've actually also used the wax sometimes like to lubricate like saw blades and things when I'm doing metal for like, to help them to like go smoothly. So I think there's just lots of like inherent like kind of practices of like being careful about your waste as a jeweler. And now even more so, like there's things you can do to make sure like your metals aren't going into like the system in terms of like being washed down the sink. There's things you can put in your sink to trap them. And a lot of them it's like, oh, it's only because you want to collect the metal value of it. And that's also part of it, but you don't want those metals going into things. You want them to be kind of be reused. You can use, things like cloths and wipes to like wipe down your hands if you have dust, or wipe down your surfaces. And then they can be put in to be refined. So there's different ways that you can be a bit conscientious about your waste. Yeah, and one of the things that's actually interesting about wax carving, which is different, is that like when you're working with metals and you're fabricating directly in metals, you have a lot of offcuts, which then might be repurposed, or they might be melted down and refined, as I talked about earlier, put back into the system. One of the things about wax carving and lost wax casting, which is interesting, is you often have less metal waste because you're making the objects and you're casting the object. You might have a little tiny sprue that connects that object to the tree, and then you might be finishing it and there'll be minimal like scraps, as it were. So there's kind of there's pros and cons of different types of processes with metal. Does that make sense, or if that answers anyone's questions?
I'm just gonna show you this. This is my wax. The
Yeah.
rest of the wax. I just keep them all.
And you
in a
melt
bowl,
it and stretch
then-
it, don't you? And then
Yeah. So I just keep them like this and then just melt it back again. And then
yeah,
so
exactly. I have
gonna
like
use it. Yeah.
yeah, I have a pot, and then the dust is collected and then, you know, melted down, and same kind of thing. Yeah.
It's a very natural ingredient. It's just beeswax and resin. So it's environmentally friendly as well for compared to the
I'm really excited. Maybe I should come for a studio visit and see about your wax.
oh, that'd be great. You know, skill swap.
I would love to.
I can feel a CPD coming on.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Kamiko, how do you heat it up with water? How do you heat up the wax to work with it?
We just melt it in the pan, and that's all. I just mix it with sort of ingredients, just put them in, and then now once you used it, obviously it's got like a bad my skin and everything is on it, so I have to
Yeah.
reheat it again, and then you have to purify it, and then you could use it again. So yeah, so it's easy. Yeah.
I also wanted to ask you, Kamiko, because I've
Yeah.
done this before with the softer wax. So I've done some like workshops like with the softer wax where you can make impressions. So if you know, like if you have like different things that you have around, or like kind of different types of surfaces, you can press it into the surface, and then you have a texture.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
do that, because I've done that with a soft wax as well. Really interesting.
With the pink wax, isn't it?
Yeah.
The pink, yeah, you
Yeah,
could
yeah.
do that. And then also with this one's, it's slightly brittle compared to the
Okay, so it's not as malleable. Okay,
yeah.
I got
So but it's because of the ingredient is sort of natural.
Yeah.
So it that will warm it up with your skin
Hand.
temperature.
Yeah.
So it's nice to malleable. When it's malleable, it's very flexible.
yeah.
The weather like summer, it's just like a melted like honey.
It's too warm.
Yeah, but
UK is definitely getting
yeah,
warmer.
but you could use
Yeah.
the like impression for that, you know,
Yeah.
when it's quite soft. So you know, once it's hard, it's very hard and very brittle. It's just break. It's
Oh, I
quite
see.
easy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Mm.
Yeah, it's nice to think more natural materials. Mel, are there our sort of jeweler's wax, our blue and green jeweler's wax that maybe not everyone will know about? Are there toxic materials in that?
Well, I have like, I was going to say I should send the thing with it, because I have looked through that before. I think there's different kinds of, it depends on the manufacturer. There's different manufacturers that supply them, and they are trying to switch, like there's more ways you can do that. There's different types of ones you can buy now, and there's different, like they have different qualities in terms of malleability and in terms of how they melt and stuff like that. I know there's been some work happening with that. But I can try and get more of that information like to you. But generally with most jewelry workshops, you try and make sure you have ventilation, and you try and make sure like those, you know, that you and I would say that same with plastics. Like I usually don't unless people understand and know about the plastics that they're working with, I usually don't encourage people to melt them. You should use them cold. But unless you have a knowledge of like, you know, what is in that, you know, material.
And if just thinking, if we've got any teachers listening today that aren't jewelers and that haven't used wax before, can we think of ways that we could translate it for the classroom? Like what other materials could we use that you would, you know, get a taste of it? And are there kind of low tech tools that we could use?
There's types of modeling clay you can use in different things where they're malleable and then they harden into like an object which stays, you know, hard. So there's that kind of option as well.
And if schools wanted to get them cast, you know, you're talking about you casting your waxes into like silver, can you cast into different materials, like maybe more affordable materials as well?
Yes, you can cast into bronze, you can cast into, so bronze is usually one of the options that's more affordable than silver. some people do aluminum casting. I don't know how many people do it, but yeah, there's different kinds of things you can cast into. Yeah.
And Mel, I noticed on your hands you had some of your rings.
I do, and I have earrings on today.
Yeah, the faceted ones. I shared your Instagram in the chat, so hopefully everyone's going to have a look. And Kamiko, I'm going to share your Instagram in the chat as well, if that's okay later on.
Yeah, this is a little tiny thing. I think that ball on here. Yeah. I'm often told that, like, but I think this is interesting because I don't think there's a way to be a certain type of jeweler. But often people say to me, like, you don't wear a lot of jewelry, you're a jeweler. But I think it's because I'm involved in making it and making it for everyone else all the time. I don't often have a lot of it on myself.
Just keeping an eye on the chat and any questions. So yeah, please do keep adding questions to the chat. I think we've got about
yeah, and I think as well, just to say, like, I mean, I don't know about, you can say yes or no, but I was just saying, I know this process is going to be going for a while, and I know people are going to be making, I think if people have questions like later on, that they can probably be directed, you know, through somehow. I don't know how people are collecting this information. So I was just going to say, I'm happy to answer questions if people, once they start a project, they have a question about how to work with a certain material.
Thanks, Mel. Oh, and I can see, Kamiko, you've added your Instagram in the chat.
Yeah,
that's great. So everyone can see the beeswax and obviously what it looks like after it's been cast in silver. Fascinating. Great. Mel, actually, I had a question with like piercing the holes in the bottle tops.
Yes.
How can we go about doing it in the classroom? Like if people are feeling a bit tentative about a group of students doing it, or people with different access needs or dexterity.
Well, one I was thinking, well, there's a couple of things that could be done. One is that is to use, like, to have someone who's like an adult, like to just pierce the holes with like a push pin, or with like if you have like, you know, safety pins or other like dress pins or things like that. Sometimes people have those around in sewing kits and things like that. The other is if you have someone who's an art teacher or a technician, or that's available, they can just drill a couple of holes in the different lids, and then they can be distributed out to individuals. So that was one of the things I was going to suggest. Sometimes I do that. I prep things ahead of time. Like I was mentioning, I had done some teaching in places where, because of health and safety, is very limited what you can take in. So inside of a hospital, for example, or, you know, on a ward. So things might have been prepped, like things might have been like pre-drilled, or we were only working with things like we weren't able to like have certain types of materials there, or certain kinds of tools. But I think most of the things I've been showing today are things you can use like with supervision, you know, scissors, paper clips. If you have like metal lid tops or can tops and you're worried about sharp edges, you can use like sandpaper or emery board, like a nail file, just to smooth them down to make sure that there's not sharp edges on them. If you're working with people who are vulnerable that you're worried about, they might cut themselves. But usually some individuals will have be able to navigate certain things and be safe as long as they're supervised, I would say. Yeah.
Thanks, Melanie. That's well. We've got to
handrails, actually that's a good point that Sarah Drew was saying. Sometimes people have the handrails where you like they're not mechanized in terms of like an on-off switch, like in terms of like being electric, but they're manual, like where you would turn a handle and then you would drill. You can actually also get, I don't have them because I'm not in the studio, but you can also get little tiny holders that you can put a drill bit in, and you just basically with your hand you twist it, and that gives like, you know, it turns a drill blade. And you can, you know, drill little holes in plastic with those as well. But actually with the ones I did, I just used a push pin. I just used a push pin or I have a pin here, or just like a dressmaker's pin. Oh, I don't have my thing up anymore. So dressmaker's pin. I just, for these ones here, or a push pin like that you would have up in a classroom, like, you know, on a cork board, to make a hole. And you can, if you have any, like, I don't know if anyone has cutting boards or things that they use for people that are doing cutting. Usually you can use that as a surface. This is a cutting board that's underneath. You probably saw the edge of it. So often I work on that, or I work on like a felt mat if I want to protect surfaces. Yeah.
That's great. And I guess for like younger sort of key stage 1, like kids that are like 5, 6, it's a nice idea to use the push pins or to do it as a team, like with the
Yeah,
teacher or
I mean,
teaching
or some
assistant.
of the ones I was showing as well, like if you're working with buttons and thread, you don't often need to use the push pins or anything like that. They can just kind of, the holes with the buttons are big enough that you can push string through without having to use a needle and thread. So yeah.
And earlier on, you mentioned paints and different kinds of paints. That might be helpful to sort of go over. And like, I know there's Posca pens. A lot of teachers are using those at the moment.
Like or acrylic paints, or like I mean, if depending on how long you want it to last. I mean, I like the idea as well of making things that are ephemeral, that might not last forever, but that can be enjoyed. So poster paints and things like that can be put onto objects to give them some color. There actually are some jewelers, and I'm not sure if people are familiar with Ma Rana's work. So Ma Rana did a whole series of jewelry which had paint on it, and the whole idea was that the paint would wear and it would show like the life of the object. So there's like, you know, lots of things you can do where you can incorporate that into like, you know, the context and the concept of what you're making.
I've just typed Ma's name into the chat so people can see and can look and Google. Very famous jeweler. Any other questions? I'm just scanning down. So let's see. We've got 5 minutes to use Mel's jewelry brain to ask her any questions.
I was just trying to think if there's anything I hadn't like, you know, shown, but I guess I just wanted to reinforce that like there isn't any particular materials you have to use for jewelry. Like it's open season, you can use whatever you want. You can embellish things with threads, with, you know, wool, with fabrics. You can tie knots in fabrics and use that to make necklaces, and then you could also incorporate tying around like bottle tops or things like that. There's lots of ways you can mix the materials and put them together. And sometimes it's not even necessarily about having like a finished object. It's just about exploring the process and exploring like the techniques. And then maybe you come up, maybe like after doing that for a period of time, you might then feel that you want to then put those techniques into practice, into making an object that you will wear.
Piece you showed us earlier on with the seeds, that was fascinating. Do you know what seeds they are and how long is that piece? When was it made?
I showed, yeah, so I can put it on, and actually this is interesting because the clasp is literally just twisted. It's literally just twisted copper wire. So it's just like twisted copper wire made into a little hook, and on the other side it's made into like a little kind of circle, and it's just regular thread or string. I'm not sure of these seeds, but I know like the kinds of seeds that I would use, like they're not necessarily the ones that we have here in the UK, but in Bermuda I know the kinds of seeds that we would use that would be dried seeds. We would also use dried like palm leaves from palmetto and palm trees, and they would kind of become thread. Like you could because you can pull them apart and then you could thread things on them. And I think you could probably do the same here with certain kinds of materials once they're dried.
In fact, Sarah said conkers and acorns for our habitats here. Yeah.
Oh, she's got a necklace. If everyone wants to pin Sarah's, you can see her conker necklace.
Let's see.
I think
seed
heads are nice. Dried seed heads can be interesting as well.
Oh, but we don't know what the seeds on your necklace are. I'm just so intrigued.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Would Bran know? Our plants expert today.
I just send a photo.
It's highly unlikely. Although we have to be careful though, because we did find in our shop we were selling some beads that came from South America, and they were used by shamans. And so they were sort of genuine article, but then they turned out to be highly poisonous. So we had to do a massive recall. So be careful.
Yeah.
Most seeds are fine.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say that I was really lucky because the lady who used to do a lot of work with us was like, you know, she knew a lot of knowledge about botanical plants and their uses. And, you know, so we were kind of given or told which ones we could use that were like safe. So maybe that's a thing where you can collaborate with someone who isn't necessarily a maker, but knows about the materials. That would be a cool, interesting project.
And Lynn Bartlett's just put in the chat, melon seeds when dried make good materials.
Ah, yes. Yeah.
And
Oh yeah, I was thinking
how old do you
about,
reckon?
Sunflower seeds. What about sunflower seeds?
Yeah, if the outside husks would just dry.
Yeah, because like I've had sunflowers, and then some people save them to replant them, but then you could also, like, you often have lots of them, so maybe some of them will be replanted and some of them might be used to make things.
I seem to remember my dad had some from the 70s that's still
Yeah.
around today. So
You can
they
also
like
dry-
thinking
you can-
about the age of them, they're like the longevity is great as well.
Yes, some people also have like you know, you can well, I don't know where you would do it necessarily, but you can sun dry like elements of fruit as well. People have dehydration things, and you can have like an orange slice dehydrated and you can string that. Yeah.
Thinking about Rachel Coley and her
Orange peel. Yeah.
I put her name into the chat.
Yeah. People are doing a lot of really interesting things with orange peels, actually, and like compressing that fabric, not just for jewelry, but for like larger applications, because I've seen that elsewhere as well.
Yeah, so Rachel, she uses like citrus peel, and she'll be like orange, and dries it, and it mimics a kind of shagreen, like an animal product, but just purely with bio waste, which is really fascinating. So I'm just keeping an eye on the chat. I'm asking, being greedy and asking so many questions myself, and just making sure I'm not missing.
I mean, you can also make paper mache elements. So beads can be made like with like paper and glue, and then if you make them around like a rod, or like something that allows you to have a hole, if you form them around that, and once they're dry, then you can string them into beads. That's another thing that could be interesting as well.
And there are a lot of really beautiful shaped seeds out there. If you look at wildflowers, we've just put a resource on our wildflower section in the education team, and some of them are just stunning shapes and sizes, tiny things you probably can't see, but they would inspire all sorts of really interesting designs, I think.
Yeah. And then if you get really excited and interesting about like, the objects, have you seen, I'm not sure, you probably are familiar, Bram, with Rob Kessler's work with the microscopic, like, kind of interior worlds of seeds and pollen, and he also uses that in his ceramics as well. So if that is a way to prompt maybe some more scientific investigation of the materials that people are using. I'll put his name in here.
Thank you, Mel. Oh, we have another question in the chat. So Melanie Mortimer would like to know, can I have your thoughts about teaching these techniques to boys? So maybe thinking about, is it the gender bias around jewelry in particular? Or
that's interesting, because I guess I hadn't thought about that, because I always am teaching different genders and non-conforming genders and everything. So I mean, a lot of the people I've worked with over the years have been boys, in particular in countries like Afghanistan, where I was working with both boys and girls. And I mean, my work itself isn't really for a specific gender. So I don't have styles that are feminine or masculine or for a particular gender. They're just for everyone and whoever wants to wear them and engage with them. So I guess my approach to making is similar, in that the pieces aren't specifically, but I guess if you're talking about responding to interests that they have, then maybe what kinds of materials they might be interested in. I mean, which teacher is this from, so I can speak to you?
Melanie Mortimer.
Melanie Mortimer. So is it that, are you asking the question because you find that some boys don't interact or engage with making, or I'm trying to understand why you're asking the question, and then I can see how I can best respond. Oh, not sure.
Hi, Melanie.
I can't hear you. Oh, you're on mute. Sorry, I can't hear you.
There we go. Can you hear me
Gotcha.
now? Yeah. Yes, I work in an all-boys school, and you know what they really love is to work with tools and machinery. And sometimes we've done a project called body adornment, which was very successful. But sometimes if you think about jewelry per se, I think they start to pull back a little bit.
They're not sure. Okay.
Yeah, maybe not invest in it, you know, like some other
What
projects.
about, I mean, I'm talking about jewelry, but they can make jewelry, but they can make other things as well. So they can make implements. So they could think about like adorning or doing something to add to like a spoon or a fork or something like that. I think there's other ways you can like think about. I know sometimes as well, like they might want to have like a pouch or something that they're carrying precious things in. You could think about how you could adorn that. I'm just trying to think of different ways to engage. Or do they have things they want to make like holders for? Like, do they have special things that they might want to make like a pouch for? You can make a pouch that can go, you know, that can go over the body. You can make phone. I know one thing that's popular is people make holders for phones. So you could make like a little thing that has a lanyard. Oh, that's the other thing I was going to mention as well. Like often we wear lanyards, and that's kind of like a form of jewelry, right? But we don't really call it jewelry. So people could maybe adapt or change if they're allowed to make adaptations or changes to like their lanyards that they have at school. Then you could think about adding little adornments or charms or things to those. Those are just some ideas off the top of my head, but I'm happy to like have, you know, a chat with you and see if there's ways we can help engage.
Yeah, thank you. That'd be great.
And a few ideas from Sarah in the chat as well about making key rings, and she did a sci-fi theme and they made cuffs and lasers, etc. Lovely.
Yeah, brilliant.
And I actually, I was assuming that they wouldn't want to make jewelry, and I went into like a youth group saying, "Oh, lads can make something else." I was being a bit sexist in a way, but then they made loads of jewelry. And
that's
like
my
necklaces and necklaces off. Yeah, so I think it's almost
my...
like taking the stigma out of lads wearing jewelry, isn't it? Really, if you can do that.
Yeah, that's what I found as well. Like I found a lot of boys and older men that are interested in engaging. But I think, like you're saying, if they're in a traditional setting, where maybe they're feeling like not as open to it, then introducing other things to start with till they feel comfortable might be helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, Sarah. And would anyone like to come on the screen and either ask Melanie a question or share what they've been making this morning? I've seen lots of busy hands.
I'd like to share mine, please, Jo.
Oh, so as we go
really
Jazz,
proud of it.
Jazz, would you be able to like spotlight people as they?
Yes, you can take my spotlight and then.
Oh, here we go. Thanks, Jazz. So I found this really lovely found object in the drawer next to me at the Crafts Council. This is maybe the advantage of working at the Crafts Council, that there's lots of interesting discarded items.
Like a bike from wire,
It's a little wire bike. So I put it with some paper clips, and I found some yellow embroidery thread, which I thought
you made little tassels. Fantastic.
Was nice because it's kind of like a Tour de France yellow jersey yellow. So I've gone for a yellow thing. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. Thanks very much, Melanie.
I love that. That's great.
Thanks, Zoe. That's amazing.
If anyone else also wants to, even if anyone else just wants to even share like a technique they've been exploring that they're excited about trying out with something else, that would be also cool.
I used the bottle top and the Hessian to make a little brooch or like a more pin. So it's just that I sewed the back of it.
Oh yeah.
I just did so paper clip and behind, so I could just turn it like this, so it's gonna be a pin.
Love it.
And also, I was wondering if I used to do is to teach the making these. This is like a plastic bottles. Just chop it into sort of like a
slices. Yeah.
And then just melt it the both sides, so it's like looks like a little bracelet almost, or bangle.
Okay, cool.
And the children loved just decorating inside, and you know, they put a few things in
Yes.
that,
Very cool.
and then we did it like we didn't do it as in jury for themselves.
Yeah.
Just we made a mood board as well. So they did. I said, you know, if you have to think to someone that you want to give to your bracelet, and so they have to think the person, and the person likes the pink color. So this
Yes,
is
mood boards are an excellent
board.
way to think about
Yeah.
pulling together.
Yeah,
ideas.
and they really enjoyed the process of doing things. So I like the girl was more like interested in the thread and wool. Yeah, so the person just put the beads together.
Yeah.
But also they did like a decoration for the Christmas tree.
I was gonna say that's also ornaments
Yeah.
are good. Yeah,
Yeah,
ornaments
so
are good.
you could
I made lots
do it. Yeah, you could do loads of different things
Yeah.
with this. We
My
made
parents still have the ornaments that I made when I was a kid now. Like,
yeah, I've got my children's one as well. The other one is just, sorry, I just mixed. Yeah, so they were
Yeah.
the same things, but
Nice.
it's made it with the Christmas tree decoration. So it was beautiful on the tree. Even though just the branch that I brought, I brought from the field. Just the dead branch was just
Yeah,
the
fantastic.
lying on the field, and the things like that. It's not necessarily the boys or girls. Everyone enjoyed it. Is for example, I was teaching quite a range of students from 2 years old till 18 years old. So it was quite a range of people, but everyone had a different kind of skills, and also the people who I worked in a special needs school, so the skills are limited with some students, but they really enjoyed doing things, using hands. Just there's no limit, and or nothing wrong, or nothing has to be perfect. It's just nice, and everyone could do
Yeah.
it.
How did you melt down the bottles? How did you do that?
You know the iron thing.
Oh, iron. Yes, you can iron.
So
Yeah.
you just cut. I had to cut it for them,
Yeah.
because it's a bit difficult, and some of them tried to do it with the hand, but I was told to the health and safety.
Yeah.
I had to do it, melt it on the both sides, but just only very quick, very like a 5 seconds.
So effective. They look great. Look really lovely.
And it became quite solid afterwards.
Yes, because they're condensed, like they're kind of condensed. Yeah, the metal becomes condensed. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing I think with some of these techniques is people can build upon them as they get more confident and using different kinds of tools and access, right? You start with really simple making and then you can kind of build up, right, to more complex forms.
We're just keeping an eye on that. Okay, so we've got about 3 minutes. Well, I'm just keeping an eye on the screen here. So we Kit's been busy making away. Laura's been busy making away.
Well, I hope
anyone else like to share
a little bit of making in the day.
or any other questions. And we don't have to put the spotlight on you. You can ask in the chat or just making sure we haven't missed anyone. I loved Zoe's piece.
Yeah, that was great. That's very fun. I don't know why I didn't think about tassels, because I made them tons of time, but yeah, it's just thinking about different ways to work with materials, isn't it?
I think it just depends what you find, doesn't it? I think
Yeah.
that's the really nice thing about it, is that if you find something you think, oh, I could do this. First, I tried wrapping the thread around the paper clips, but it was too fiddly, so I gave up.
Yeah. Well, that was the other thing I was going to say with the knots, like when you have these kinds of knots, like if you're just tying a knot, you can just tie a knot by itself, but you can also like put a bead in and tie a knot with the bead, or add a charm, or like that was one of the ways you can use like broken bits of jewelry, like an earring if you have pliers, you can turn like the old post into like a you know, like a bail or a pendant, and then you can thread it as a charm. So as opposed to like it just being forever like missing its mate, it can have a new life as a charm or a dangle on something else. Yeah.
Would
I think
anyone-
it's nice what you were saying before as well about the teachers learning the students. That's really nice, isn't it? It's a two-way process, so that you don't have to have too much of a plan, and you can sort of go with the flow a bit, can't you? So there's so much you can do.
And I think as well that takes the pressure off. I think often, like a lot in particular now, a lot of students have a lot of pressure to perform, you know, with like tests and like assessments. And if you have something that doesn't have a particular like outcome that has to be reached and they can just explore, I think that takes a lot of the pressure off and allows them to just like take their time and work at whatever pace they want to, and being more collaborative because it's not competitive. So I think it's important to have those kinds of experiences that are, you know, that are open.
Yeah, definitely. And it's kind of broadens our skill set as teachers as well, doesn't it? It's surprising, you know, not that we should be surprised, but it's nice when, you know, you show a technique and then somebody does it completely differently, and then it kind of, you know, it's a domino effect, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think as well, it's also nice to give people the option, like, you know, you can talk about people making a something finished or a project, but also you can talk about just practicing a skill or technique that they've discovered. So, you know, they might just show you like, you know, I do embroidery, but I'm not always doing like something that's a particular design that's going to be on display. Sometimes I'm just learning how to do a certain stitch, and I might have a practice session. So they can just be practicing like a technique and just can show their process as well if they just wanted to, or say why they're interested in that particular aspect of the practice and what they're excited about, or what ideas they have of where they might use that in the future. Like they're like, oh, I'm working on threading bottle tops and I'm not sure what it's going to be yet, but I think maybe I might want to do a necklace, or I might want to do a bracelet, or I might want to do a new handle for a handbag that I have, or a bag I have, or, you know, a charm or something.
It's like a physical sketchbook then, isn't it? So it's like we were talking about the different processes of learning, then they're collecting the samples together to give them to refer back to, aren't they?
Yeah, and I think in the chat.
Yeah, Kit's been making sequins out of plastic bottles with a hole punch. Love that.
Oh, fantastic. When are you doing that? I would have signed up for that.
Oh, that's great. Oh, keeping an eye on our time. So we're going to have a break in a second until 12 o'clock. And then we're going to come back and listen to our education specialist at the Eden Project, Bren Howell. But Mel, thank you so much. Really enjoyed that. Yeah, listening to you talk.
Fun. And like I said, I'm coming with my jewelry hat on, but it doesn't have to be jewelry. It can be anything. It could be a thing. It doesn't have to have a name. It could be, you could hang it on your wall. You could lay it on your table. You know, you can just look at it and enjoy it every once in a while, have it in a secret drawer.
Thank you. And thanks for making it so accessible for, you know, people with different education settings. I think everyone will really appreciate that as well.
Welcome. And I'm looking forward to hearing Bran's talk later after the break.
Thank you. So back at 12, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. It was great. Thanks.
Welcome back, everyone. We'll give everyone another minute before we get started. Welcome back, everyone. So our second external speaker of the day, I'm really excited about this part of the morning. We've got our education specialist from the Eden Project, Bran Howell, and Bran's going to be talking about sustainability, but through his particular lens. Bran, I'll leave you to do a proper introduction to yourself and what your role is at the Eden Project before you start your presentation. But thank you so much for joining us today. Over to you.
Absolute pleasure. I hope everyone can hear me and see me, and I hope Jazz is here somewhere, because thanks to the technology meltdown this morning, she's going to be in charge of my slides. Is she around? Anyway, me, Bran. I used to be a teacher very long time ago. I was a primary school teacher, and then I started working in environmental education charities, and I set up my own little charity a long time ago and did a lot of community work and youth work and sort of work with young people in inner city Plymouth on quality of life issues. And then I discovered Eden, and I kind of moved down here, and I've enjoyed it ever since. And so today I'm very aware of the fact that I have got far too many slides. I did want to show them, but I couldn't because of the IT. So we're going to romp through a lot of stuff today. And if all you get at the end of this is sort of memories of a lot of really beautiful images and a ton of enthusiasm, then you've probably got a fairly good version of Eden Project, really. And so I thought I'd skate over some of the big stories and things, and then we can talk about any more detail and sort of specifics later on in this process, in the CPD or whatever. And obviously feel free to get in touch with me and talk to me about any ideas you might have, or anything I've said that you might agree with, disagree with, or just want to know more. So I'm afraid we're going to romp through a lot of pictures, because I realise two things. One, a lot of you probably haven't been to the Eden Project, and two, we can't really talk about sustainability without talking about how we are and what we do and why we do things. So the whole history of the Eden Project, the buildings we work in, the stories we tell, and the sort of messages we get out there, they're all part of the story about sustainability. You can't separate it. A bit like you can't talk about sustainability as being something that happens in the future. It's right here now. And so what we're going to do is run through a quick history of the Eden Project, just in case you haven't been here, followed by a bit about how we talk about our messaging, and then I'll probably run out of time. So hold on to your hats, people, because we're going to romp. So welcome to the Eden Project. If I could have the next slide, Jazz. This is going to work. This is where we're from, down here in Cornwall. It's generally a bit warmer and wetter than most places in the country. We rarely get frosts, we get a lot of wind, and we get a lot of rain. But we also get a lot of glorious sunshine and beautifulness, perhaps not today. So we're right down in the southwest of England. Okay, thank you. And Cornwall is regarded as a place for people, oh, you're so lucky to live in Cornwall. It's actually one of the second poorest regions in the country, and it has suffered from huge amounts of industry that has been and gone. One of them, the key one for us in this instance, is China clay making or mining. Now, China clay is used in everything, all sorts, anything white, basically, paper, toothpaste, paint. And it creates these massive amounts of waste, and huge areas of our landscape have sort of got this sort of rather scary legacy, which is kind of beautiful in a haunting way, but it does mean it's economically unviable. And so China clay has left a huge stamp on this area where we are now, and also is why we're here. So if we have the next slide. Oh, and again, sorry, I didn't realise. So this is a picture of where we decided to build the Eden Project. This is an old China clay works, and it was part of its sell-by date. It wasn't useful anymore. It's got no soil, no nature. In fact, they made a Doctor Who movie film thing episode, back in the sort of 70s, I believe, on the bottom of this pit, because you couldn't tell you're on the planet. And you might look at that and go, well, that's the worst place in the world to build a garden. It's not even got any soil. And that was the point. We want to show people, actually, if you give nature a chance, we can turn it from that into something beautiful. We also want to show people that actually humans are quite cool. I mean, despite all the stories you get at the moment across the world, if you scratch below the surface, you can find stories about how people can work together and do some of the most amazing things. Now, Jazz, if you click on down here, I can't do it, but if you click on down the bottom, there's a little animation there to show you the transformation. And that is where we're at now. And in fact, I'm talking to you from that spiky building in the front, in the foreground. And I'll talk a bit more about the site as we go on, because like I said, this is a key part of our sustainability story. So next slide, please. Thank you. And so we built the most amazing structures, and one of the reasons people come here is because we've got these incredible things. This is the Union building. It's the biggest greenhouse in the world, and we've still got the Guinness Book of Records for the most scaffolding in one place. And when they were building these greenhouses, and not many people know this, but they actually had to write risk assessments just in case we had thunderstorms in there. We had no idea how it was going to turn out. And in actual fact, when you go in there at night, there is clouds hanging around in the mist and amongst the trees. It's absolutely beautiful. It's 51 meters high and 200 meters long and 100 meters wide, and it's full of tropical plants. And it's one of the reasons why people come and visit. Okay. And this is the site now. Like I said, we've got the biggest greenhouse in the world. We've got the second biggest greenhouse in the world, and then acres and acres and acres of garden and land that we use in all sorts of ways. And the idea behind the project is to tell people or talk to people about how important plants are and how important nature is. And so that's what I'm going to try and concentrate on next. Okay. Sorry, you're going to be busy because there's a lot of slides. And to do this, we talk about things like the rainforest. This is some shots from inside our rainforest. I think we've got over 3,500 different types of plants. Goodness knows how many. And every single plant in there is used by humans in some way or another. That's why they're there. So we talk about how important we rely on, how important nature is and how we rely on it. Even here in cold old England, well, it's not that cold at the moment, I know, we rely on the rainforest for all sorts of products and services that we just take for granted, but we'd notice if they weren't there. Okay, next please. We've got the Mediterranean biome, the cradle of, well, one civilization, and a place where we can talk about the history of agriculture from our point of view in our world, but also from you know, how that agriculture has degraded the environment as it is at the moment. But very, very beautiful place, our Mediterranean biome. Thank you, Jazz. And we've got the outdoor gardens as well, which are not just beautiful, again, full of plants that we use to talk about how important plants are and how we rely on them every day without even realising. Okay, thank you. We need to have a special sign, don't we? Yeah. So this is our mission, and basically we're saying, look, nature's looked after us forever, and we're long before we were humans. It's been giving us everything we need to survive and thrive. And right now, nature's in trouble. And if nature's in trouble, then we're in trouble because we rely on it for everything. And so we've got to repay that sort of that generous gift it's given us and start looking after it so that it can continue to look after us. Because you know we're toast basically if we don't start changing our ways. So if you'd like to go to the next slide, this is one we show to young people. Plants, when do you not use them? You're all breathing, you all eat plants, everything you eat comes from plants. And you don't get beef burger trees or milk bushes, but you know, honestly, if they need to feed, you feed cows grass. Most of our medicines come from plants. Most of our shelters are made with plants. Our heat comes from plants, even if it's any electricity, which is just old plants, you know, generated by old plants you dug out of the ground. The atmosphere is stable, kept stable by our plants, and we're all wearing plants, you know, so we can go on and on about how important these plants are and how we use them. And so we want to show people that we need to look after these plants and the places they grow and the people that grow them. And we're trying to connect people with nature via their stomachs or their clothes or their medicines. Okay, thank you. And we're not afraid to point out that actually the world is a scary place. This diagram looks really complicated, and it is. But basically, each different sector is a sort of different part of the story of how we use the world for all sorts of interesting things. And each wedge represents a different part of the sort of our reliance on nature. And the green ones are the ones that where we're using nature within the boundaries of the Earth provides, with the sustainable boundaries. The orange and the yellow are boundaries that we've exceeded. And as you can see, we're exceeding the boundaries of the planet in so many ways, in so many sort of important ways that are significant. And so basically we're borrowing from our children in terms of the future. And this is quite scary stuff. And we're very honest about that. We don't patronise people, especially young people, about this. But we aren't here to shape our thinking. We aren't here to nag people or tell them how to live, because that's none of our business. And we approach this in a very unique, and well, not unique so much anymore, but in a very Eden style. And I think that's why we're still one of the most popular visitor attractions, and people come and visit us in their droves. So if you'd like to move on, I just want to show you how we approach this really scary story. First of all, we believe in humans. We believe in people. You know, people can do the most amazing and wonderful things. And if we work together, then we can sort this mess out, you know, easily, without a problem. And so our message is that actually we can. And if you go to the next slide, I just want to show you, that doesn't look great. Oh no, I don't know whether, oh yeah, can you keep clicking through this, sorry, as I talk. That's what I want to talk about. This is an exhibit that is on the entrance to our to Eden, and it's been going there before we even opened. This is called The Great Plant Takeaway, and it sort of sums up how we use art and creativity to tell some fairly serious stories. And everybody has to go past this. It's been going for 22 years, well, apart from when it breaks, because it is getting quite old now, but it is and we still get lots of complaints about it. This is what we call the dead cat, but it's called Plant Takeaway. So if you could just play this and hope it works, because this is what caused my problems in the first place. No, that didn't go very well, did it? I haven't got any sound either. Move on then, Jazz, because otherwise you'll end up with a whole heap of stuff there. Thank you. So we like to use humour and creativity to talk about these issues, because we want to connect with people, and we want to talk about sustainability using our head, our hearts and our hands. Our head so that we understand, we have knowledge, our hearts so we feel something about this, so we're passionately involved in it, and our hands so that we have tools in which we can sort this mess out. And the Eden Project is fairly unique in that we run ourselves as a sustainable business, and we started at scale, which is well, not unusual anymore, because it's 20 years ago it really was unusual. And we use this, what we call the development compass, just to describe sustainability. If you could click on the next bit, please, Jazz. Sorry, I wasn't. Just keep going through this. Okay, so So everything we do, every decision you make, everything, absolutely everything, from breathing right through to buying a car, has an effect on the world around you, not just on your world, but the world that goes out beyond and beyond and beyond. And it will have an effect on nature, and it will have an effect on the economy and society. So imagine you buy some chocolate. Somewhere in the world, someone has had to grow the cocoa to make that chocolate. Are those people being treated well? Are there children working in the fields? It's highly likely there are. Are there schools? Is there healthcare? Is there any sort of security for these people? Often there isn't. So we need to think about that. If we want to remain sustainable, we need to think about the people that are producing the food that we're eating. Also, that cocoa needs to be grown somewhere. Are they trashing rainforests? And often they are, to create these crops, these cash crops, so that they can just survive, generally because people are incredibly poor in a lot of places. So we need to think about, is that chocolate being produced in a way that is looking after the planet and regenerating areas of the land, or is it just trashing the world? And are people being paid enough money to produce this chocolate? Not just the farmers, but the traders and the people that drive the trucks and the people that ship the beans and the people that make the actual chocolate. Are people being paid, or are we contributing to this vicious circle of poverty around the world? So when we think about anything, even when we make any decision, whether it's employing a local computer support tech team, which I need right now, or whether it's buying chocolate from the other side of the world, we want to think about this development compass rose and how our decisions affect the world. And that is the first step in understanding our place in the world and the effect that the decisions we make have in ripples across the world. If we can move on, I just want to quickly talk about a shop, because we all man to spend money, we all go shopping. And it was the old days that Eden's shop was full of sort of cheap plastic stuff that you could buy anywhere in the world. And we sort of sat there and went, wait a minute, this isn't right. So everything you buy from the shop tells a story. It tells a story about our reliance on nature. It tells a story about looking after people. It tells about recycling. It talks about sort of low carbon products or local products. And we use the term, your wallet is your weapon, because we want people to understand the way they spend their money, from where they invest their pensions right through to how they spend their money in the high street or indeed in our shop, can make a positive difference to the way the world works. And so our story, our method, our messaging about sustainability is very much based on practical experience that people can actually sort of go out and have themselves. And it's about giving people the tools to make a difference, just by spending money in this instance. But that is very much a really great example of how Eden talks about how we think and do sustainability here at Eden Project. If you could just move on to the next one. And on a slightly different scale, we've got some massive problems around there, and there are some really neat and simple solutions out there. Not cheap solutions, unfortunately, but we've just dug a giant hole, and we're about to turn over, and it's just happening in the next week or month or so. All our heating is going to be completely free and carbon neutral, because we're going to take hot water that we pumped over 4 miles down into kilometers down into the granite below us, and it's coming up really hot. In actual fact, it's coming up too hot. We don't quite know what to do with the extra heat, but it will heat our rainforest, it will heat our water, it will heat our buildings, and eventually, it's also heating our nursery, and eventually it will give us electricity. So we're here to point out the big issues and the big solutions, as well as the sort of simple and basic ones that everyone can do. If you like, we're a showcase. And the way we operate is that story, is all about sustainability. Okay, next slide, please. We're all about stories. We have storytellers on site. We have people telling stories throughout the summer. We believe that if we tell you our story, then you'll tell us your story, and that's how conversations start. And that's about doing things together and working together. We're not here to lecture people or tell people how to live. We're here to listen to how people think they want to live and their solutions. And I know this isn't the opportunity to, but later on in the future sort of training sessions and things, I'm really keen to listen to your ideas and things, because I'm not the expert. I just have to be sitting here at the Eden Project. But anyway, we tell our stories. So we want awe and wonder. We want people to reconnect with the planet and realise just how blooming gorgeous it is. If I had the planet in a little box and it was floating there with all the sort of world spinning and the clouds around the outside of the blue and the greens, it'd be like the most beautiful jewel you've ever seen. But because we're standing on it, We don't really appreciate it. So we want people to really appreciate where they live. Next slide, please. We want to be honest about the awe and wonder, and we want to be honest about jeopardy as well. We want to be dead clear with young people, and we don't patronise or sugar the pill. We're in trouble, and we need to change things. It doesn't matter where you look and how you measure it, things aren't looking great. So we need to change rapidly, and we can, absolutely we can. But it's important that people understand why we're talking about this. And so finally, the last slide in this little sort of how we tell our story, we talk about how we use examples of how things work and how people can do the most amazing things given the opportunities. And everything you see at Eden follows that pattern, whether it's a workshop or whether it's an exhibit or whether it's just a general sort of journey you go on as you come to the Eden Project. We talk about how amazing the planet is, how it's in trouble and how we can help. It's head, heart and hands again and again and again. And I'll be going back to that theme when we talk about, working with craft, working in schools, working with all the parameters that, a school and the curriculum give you, how we can incorporate that in small little chinky ways, because I think it's really important. Okay, next slide. This is the most important slide, actually. If you forget everything else I say, we are nature. We can't continue to see ourselves as being this thing that isn't part of nature, because we rely on it so many times in so many spaces. And this picture here is of a sculpture we've got actually on site. None of this is Photoshop, by the way. This is just a shot of it in action. And it is a cyanobacteria, which is the first organism which, quite by chance, started producing oxygen into the atmosphere, which completely poisoned the old atmosphere and turned the red planet into the blue planet. So everything we own, everything we know, comes from this one moment, or more or less everything we know, comes from this one moment when this little bacteria started producing oxygen and then changed the way the world works. So we use art to tell these really profound stories. And actually, this is a beautiful piece of work that produces these fantastic little poops of oxygen all over the place, and young children love to dance around it. It's the most beautiful thing to watch. So that, for me, is everything you want from art. It tells a story, it's beautiful, and people interact with it in a playful way. What's not to like? Anyway, let's move on. Because we do stuff, we're here to demonstrate. We reconnect people with nature. If you'd like to click on the next slide, please. And keep clicking as well. Sorry, these aren't set up for somebody else to do it. We reconnect people. Last year, we had 17 million people take part in the project. You might have heard of the Big Lunch. This year, we don't know yet because we're still counting, but it's going to be a lot more than that. So just sitting down with your neighbours and having some food is an amazing experience in itself, but we know that it causes all sorts of other ripples and all sorts of other things where people work together in their neighbourhoods, providing everything from sharing lawnmowers to taking your books back to the library. So we do stuff on a scale. Next, please. And again, please. Now, this term regenerative, I can't even say it, regenerative sustainability. Being sustainable is leaving the world as we found it, which is was okay in the 70s, but now that's too late. We need to be regenerative now, and we want to leave the world better than we found it. And so we want to make choices that actually benefit the planet as well as us. And that doesn't mean that we go without, that doesn't mean that we have to live in huts and eat beans or lentils for the rest of our lives. That's just about being sensible about the choices we make. And we've got a great example here on the right-hand side. You can see at the top a picture of some fairly denuded countryside. That's in Costa Rica. And we're involved in a project where they put a big fence around it, and the forest started growing back. And the second picture now is the forest as it is now. Now, 7 old rivers have started flowing through that forest now, and pilots have to take a different route around it because the cloud base above it has changed so much they can't see through it. And now the farmers that work there, we're working with a big chocolate company, are producing high quality chocolate that is going to one company who is buying that at a premium price, so the farmers can now afford to live in the area that they own. And all that is about people just having a bit of thought, standing back and going, wait a minute, why don't we do things differently? And that is what the Eden Project's about. These simple solutions that make a massive, massive difference. And sustainability doesn't have to be at this scale by any stretch of the imagination, but it does have to be about simple ideas that we can all go, oh yeah, and try, and then step back and see what happens. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. We all make mistakes, just like in craft. but it's the thing that about actually making a difference and stepping up and changing the world, or trying to change the world in little ways. That's important. Next, please. And again, please. So we do stuff. We like to change places. We like to change people. We like to create new ideas. These are all new projects that we've been working on over the last year, I guess. Next, please. And again, now I don't know why I put this slide in, because actually it's a bit academic. We like to think that we do systems thinking, but I'm really not convinced we've got there yet. But it's an aspiration. And so we'd like to think that we're systems thinkers, but that's probably a bit ambitious. But it's important. We need to think about holistically about the way we live in the world. Okay, next, please. And again, back to this head, heart, and hands. You know, every message. We want people to know stuff. We want people to feel stuff. I want people to leave my workshops angry or inspired, or just like kind of, oh, this isn't fair. And I want people to go away with something that they can do, something in their hands that they can take with them back to their worlds, wherever that is, and sort of try. And so, and I think that's really very close to the way that the Make First and the whole sort of ethos that you're talking about throughout the whole morning, I think is a really important and key link. Okay, next slide, please. I don't even know how many slides are left. Just a quick one about the education team. We're a smallish team, but we have 50,000 young people come every year to do workshops. And they can range from climate change right through to, I don't know, playing outdoors. We have an online program which you can check out by looking on our website, and we do a lot of teacher training. So when we talk about these things, we talk about them because we've been doing it for 20 years, and you know, in our unique circumstances and environment, we've been able to experiment and play, because we don't have the curriculum. Well, we do have to work the curriculum, obviously, because we work in schools, but we have a bit more freedom. And so, you know, this is where we're coming from with a lot of this work. Feel free to get in touch and talk about any of that anytime. Okay, next, please. And so the site, what do you see when you get here? We use art all the time. We use our ephemeral art, permanent art, different mediums to tell stories. We don't want to fill our place with boring signs that no one reads. So every piece of art is there to talk about a plant produce, the people that grow that plant, about climate change. And we use those pieces of art to tell quite serious messages. Like I say, they can be ephemeral and they can be sort of permanent. So we use art a lot and create art and creativity a lot. Next, please. We use live performance. Again, it's about telling stories, about telling and engaging with people. And we have loads of professionals coming in, and we have our own team of artists and musicians and stuff who actually live and work on site. Next, please. And this is the ultimate version of that, is that we have sessions every year. They're a blooming nightmare because we all end up working 13-hour days, but they are a load of fun. You know, we have lots of really famous people coming and playing here. And the whole point of these things is to get people to come to the Eden Project who don't normally come, who wouldn't consider coming to the Eden Project. And it works. They get a free ticket in and out afterwards or before the session, and they come and join something like Youngblood or the Oasis or whoever it is they're here, and then spend the next day in a bleary fashion staggering around the site. But it really works, you know. And this is the hooks, the sort of hooks that we use to get people interested in the sort of things that we're talking about, you know. And it's really important that we don't shy away from sort of being grand and being big and bold and being fun, really. Because if there's no point in saving the planet if we're all going to sit around being miserable on it. Anyway, let's carry on, because I'm conscious that I'm going to overrun, so we might just stop in the middle of this, but I've got so much to tell you. So if we could move on quickly. How long have I got? Oh, I have overrun. Way overrun. Finally, it's not just us. This is us at COP26 in Edinburgh last year. We got to meet all sorts of really important people, you know, like presidents and prime ministers and also, but the really important people were the people, the activists who are actually doing the stuff. And that's my message to you. You know, you are the activists. You're out there working with young people, and they're the people that we want to talk to. So please be in touch. Talk to me about anything you want to ask me, any ideas or anything. And I'm going to stop now because I realised I've just overrun, and I'm really sorry about that.
Thank you, Bran. Thank you so much. That was great. I think really good for scene setting for us. We know that young people are so engaged with all of these themes and they really care about the climate emergency. And in Craft School Younker's Challenge, sustainability and saving the planet was a reoccurring theme in submissions. So I'm so happy that we'll be able to continue with around those themes and that important work. Let's have a look. Yeah, we have 1 minute left, but we won't be cut off. So if anyone does have a question in the chat to ask Bran, you are very welcome. And then have a look. And then I do have some thank yous as well. So
while we wait for questions, are you just going to remind everyone of the registration process, Jo?
Yes, so the registration is in the link in that slide. I wonder if someone could just add that. So it's open from today, so you can register, and it will be open up until just after Christmas, but please do get in as early as you can. And then from September, we will start sharing the toolkit and different resources, some videos, and there will be CPD as well, starting from that autumn term. Any questions as well, get in touch with us. I did add my email address in the chat. We can add that again. But as we're waiting for, yes, youth groups can register. It's open to everyone, Key Stage 1 to 4, but whatever setting you're in, you can join us.
Yeah, we had a few youth groups last time, some children's centres, lots of homeschools. So yeah, we design it to be as inclusive as possible. So any setting that works with those young people in that age group can join. There's a question from Emma, Jo, about showcasing.
Oh yes, will you have a showcase event to celebrate student submissions? Yes, we will. So this year we had an online celebration event. Everyone that submitted work was able to attend. We had a make along with Elaine Mullings, and we also had a studio tour with Onome Otiti at Cockpit Arts. So there was an awards presentation, but also a big celebration for everyone that took part, and that was really well received by teachers and students. So we'll probably be doing that again this year. So while we're so if you can scan through the chats, I need to do some very important thank yous before we head off. So thank you to everyone joining us today for your enthusiasm and support of Future Makers and craft education at all levels and all settings. Thank you to Melanie for your brilliant make along session, and for Bran for opening our eyes to the possibilities around sustainability and the wonder of the natural world. Thank you to our Craft School business partners and the Eden Project in particular, our supporters, Hobbycraft, NSEAD, Access Arts, and our learning and business skills supporter, Cox London. So lots of people behind the scenes doing so much work with us. And finally, thank you to our Crafts Council team. Our work is always underpinned by teamwork and everyone's combined energy and commitment to our common goal of enabling that everyone has access to a creative education and finding their voice through making. So thank you, everyone. Zoe, have we got any other?
I don't think so, other than to everyone for joining us. It was lovely to see everyone making along. Yeah, please do pass on the kind of registration details onto other schools that you work with, other colleagues, people in your networks. We'll be doing a kind of big push over the next few weeks before the end of term to get news out about Craft School so that people can register in time for September. And just that I really enjoyed your talk, Bran. Thank you so much. I love the idea of kind of simple solutions that can change the world. So I think we'll take that forward so into Craft School. Yeah, I'll hand back to you, Jo, and thank you to you for coordinating everything so beautifully, obviously. Your excellent timekeeping.
Thank you, Zoe. Oh, thank you, everyone. Yeah, I hope that you'll join us for the next CPD events and the drop-in sessions. Thank you to you all.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Fran. That was very exciting.
Thanks all. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.